Okay, Chair, you're live. You're ready when you are.
Okay, good evening all to members, officers and the public that are tuning in tonight. I would like to start the meeting of the Planning, Transport and Regeneration Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I am Councillor John Allen and I am Chair of this committee. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting is being live streamed and also being recorded for publication on the Council's website. I would also like to remind members and officers to mute their microphone when they are not speaking and to use the raise your hand option when you wish to speak. Right, have we got any apologies for absence? I've not received any apologies. Kenna, do you have any apologies?
Thank you, Chair. No, I haven't received any apologies for this evening.
Okay, I do believe, are we full? Have we got every member in attendance?
Chair, I've made a note of those present and the only member we're missing is Councillor Van Day.
We're outstanding, Councillor Van Day, thank you. Okay, I'll move on to item 2, the minutes. I move that the minutes of the Planning, Transport, Regeneration, Overview and Scrutiny Committee held on the 8th of December 2020 be approved as a correct record.
Agreed.
Agreed, yeah. So the accuracy of the minutes are good. Okay, minutes are approved. Right, item 3, I've not agreed to any items of urgent business this evening, so we can move on to item 4. Does anyone have any declarations of interest, and does anyone wish to declare a declaration of interest? No declarations of interest? Okay, we move on to item 5, which is the active travel tranche 2. And can I ask officers to introduce the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. So the government has recently provided local authorities with funding to deliver walking and cycling improvements to encourage and enable more sustainable travel options for shorter journeys. And the council has received £690,000 from the DfT to deliver improvements in Thurrock. And this report provides members with an overview of the engagement process and potential schemes that could be delivered. Chair, I'd like to hand over to Matt now to take members through the detail of the report. Thank you.
That's fine. If you wouldn't mind taking over, Matt.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, certainly. As Lee has said, the council is in receipt of £690,000 of funding for active travel tranche 2, our second allocation under active travel. And the funding is to be used to support, encourage and enhance walking and cycling opportunities across the borough, and to engage fully with local users and communities to understand support for proposed schemes and to gain input from local communities and residents in terms of what they would like to see delivered within the scheme proposals that have been put forward. So looking into the detail of the report, you can see that the allocation comes in as mainly capital funding to actually deliver new infrastructure, but there's also an element of revenue funding. And the intention is to utilise that funding across revenue and capital to deliver new schemes, but also to use the revenue to support an existing facility and resource that has been applied, which is the Till Recycle Hub scheme, which is something that's been delivered through previous allocations of active travel funding and is currently run by the South Essex Active Travel Scheme. So it's a combination of revenue to enable that to be resourced and continue, and the capital schemes that are proposed as well. So looking through into section 3 of the report, you'll see that there is a proposed scheme list that's identified. The first scheme on there is the Tilbury Cycle Hub, and as I suggest, the funding, the indicative allocation of funding there is looking to use revenue funding to enable that cycle hub provision to continue, and it's something that's been in place for a couple of years now. It's seen as an exemplar by the Department for Transport, and the revenue funding will allow that to continue to provide a really valuable resource to not just to Tilbury but to the outlying area as well. And then other schemes that have been identified include a signalised crossing of Brentwood Road, the A128 at the Alsett Cock. Currently, there is a very well used walking and cycling route, but that is broken at the moment at the A128 at the Alsett Cock there, where there is only informal crossing points. So the suggestion is to bring a more formal signalised crossing point forward there. There's also a proposal to provide walking and cycling link in Stamford along London Road. There is also the proposal to bring forward the shared use route along Purfleet Road in Aveley to connect the A1306 through to Aveley Centre. Also measures to be applied on Branksome Avenue in Stamford-le-Hope to make that a more accessible and attractive walking and cycling route. And then also Corringham Road in Stamford-le-Hope, where we're looking to link Stamford Town Station to Sorrells Roundabout via Billet Lane, again with a dedicated walking and cycling route. And then the last two areas of improvement that are identified there are for cycle parking and signage to be supported across this package, so that where additional signage is needed, that can be applied, and where additional cycle parking might be needed to support these schemes, that can be applied as well, and an indicative allocation of funding applied to that. And then the DFT letter makes it quite clear that there is a requirement for monitoring to be undertaken to understand the increase in use of these routes as they are delivered and start to be used. Going on from there, just again a breakdown of how the capital and the revenue allocation has been identified through the DFT approval letter, which sets out our funding total of 690 and the breakdown there between revenue and capital. So the 552 is the amount to be used across the capital schemes, and then up to 138,000 to be used to help fund the revenue allocation for resource to continue the cycle hub. There is also, it's worth pointing out that for these schemes, the funding allocation is indicative at the moment. There is a need to bring forward feasibility studies and outline design to understand exactly what can be delivered in all of these locations, and that work will be undertaken so that we can actually see how those schemes will fit the funding allocation that has been identified. 3.7 of the report identifies the need for engagement, and DFT have been very clear that there needs to be robust consultation and engagement with users and the local community on the proposed schemes. And we are proposing to go out through our consultation portal to engage on those proposed schemes from next week. And the portal is set up in such a way that those scheme proposals are identified in a very broad brush way to be at the moment, which enables people to go in and identify their support for a scheme or a number of schemes, and it enables local people to provide input and comments that will help inform what local people would like to see delivered as part of those schemes. So the consultation process is very important to inform the next part of the process, which is the feasibility design for those schemes, to identify what actually can be delivered and then cost up what will be delivered, and we'll see how those schemes will be delivered against the actual allocation of 690. So those are the schemes that these were identified in a letter that went to the DFT earlier in the year, and they're set out in the table above as I've gone through there. we are asking this evening, obviously, for the committee to note and endorse the recommendations within this report. That will enable the report to go to Cabinet tomorrow night for full approval, so that we can take this forward, start to undertake the feasibility and design for the scheme proposals, and develop the delivery programme for the Tranche 2 schemes with the funding that we've been allocated. The engagement approach, it's a slight delay on that, as identified in 5.1. That hasn't actually been undertaken at the time that we've identified. There's been a bit of a delay, but as I say, the consultation will commence from next week. We commence in the 15th of February. So that's it, Chair. I'll just refer back to the recommendations or any questions that yourself or the committee might have.
Thank you for the report, Matt. It's just one little question that I want to ask regarding the Alsicott A128, the signalised crossing, the new Toucan crossing signalised. Do we have a rough date of when implementation will take place on that?
Well, we'll go through the consultation, and if that is identified as a scheme to be delivered, then what we are looking to do is deliver the schemes in as short order as possible. I'd imagine in terms of getting that designed up and implemented, we're probably looking at the first quarter of the new financial year.
Okay, thank you, Matt. I mean, just looking at the executive summary and the active travel, actually getting people out of their cars, walking and cycling, which is obviously a healthier option, and it also reduces air quality, makes air quality better, I should say, and reduces air pollution. That's what I should say. But yeah, it all seems a very good thing, and I can't see any reason why we shouldn't, approve this and put it through to the for tomorrow to be discussed. I'll hand over to members if they've got any questions. We've got Councillor Carrion with his hand up. Was he first?
He was, Chair, yes.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for the report, Matt. Firstly, I support any move to try and get people on cycling and to reduce congestion and increase health benefits. It's really important, and that's why I am sort of slightly disappointed that the grant got reduced by 40%, and the number of initiatives that must have been cut because of that. So could you sort of lay out the reasons why we went from 1.2 million, I think it was, to 690,000, which is obviously a 40% cut?
Yes, Councillor. Yeah. So the allocation for Tranche 2 is based on a number of things. One of those being the rollout of Tranche 1, the Emergency Active Travel Fund that we were awarded last year, and there were some quite clear guidelines provided for that rollout, and the DfT kind of looked at and assessed what had been delivered by certain local authorities, and then calculated how they would gain Tranche 2, what they would be allocated for Tranche 2 as a result of delivery in Tranche 1. Some of the reasons for us not being able to deliver certain things in Tranche 1 were due to sort of space on the network, capacity on the network, and some issues around that, which there was a bit of a concern that there would be an impact on other parts of the network. So some of the things that have been delivered elsewhere, in areas like along seaside kind of locations and the like, where there are some pretty extensive cycle routes that have been delivered, we weren't able to undertake that kind of work without quite a significant impact on other parts of the network. So as a result, the calculation that came through from DfT following that saw Tranche 2 slightly reduced.
Councillor Kerrim, have you got a follow-up question?
Yes, sorry, Chair, it's always a delay in unmuting my mic, so bear with us. And thanks for your indulgence, Chair. Thanks for that answer, Matt. So in essence, it was something to do with how we rolled out tranche 1, which caused the government to feel that we needed a reduction for tranche 2.
Yeah, that was a part that had a part to play in the allocation, and a number of local authorities, because of the nature of what was delivered first time around, and it was very much emergency pop-up quick win solutions that were asked to be identified. We looked at what could be done without that kind of detriment to other parts of the network, and as a result, certain things were on a list and then didn't get delivered, and as a result, the calculation for us and for other local authorities was reduced as a result for the tranche 2 delivery.
And so thank you for that. So, I mean, in essence, it sounds like the government didn't particularly like, or there was elements of tranche 1, the rollout, that they didn't sort of approve of, and that's why we ended up having less for tranche 2, which is sort of disappointing. So as I said, I think it's really important, and I think this is a piece of work which I will support tonight. And like the chair said, and the reason I'm digging in this question is because I want to sort of learn lessons in case funding like this ever comes up again, especially with the changes to the economy based on COVID. I can see, hopefully, more and more encouragement of this. So would it be possible to sort of release to members of this committee I don't know whether it was a letter you got or an email or a document which sort of went into detail the reasons why it was reduced, and perhaps that could be shared with all of us so that we can look at it and think, we need to do that next time. We need to make sure we don't do this, and we can make sure we learn lessons from it. Would you be able to undertake to do that for us, please? Yeah, there is a letter, so we can certainly circulate that out. And you're right, part of the thing, it was about learning lessons from tranche 1. Looking at tranche 2, that's why we're looking at, even if maybe certain schemes don't get delivered, there will be a feasibility and a design that's undertaken. So when additional funding maybe becomes available further down the line, we're on the front foot this time, so that there are schemes that have gone through that feasibility and that initial design process, so that we're ready next time round, rather than maybe being on the back foot. So, but certainly able to share that information. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you very much, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Matt, for your response, and again, thank you, Councillor Kerry, for your questions, and I fully endorse seeing perhaps the letter. That's a good call. Kenna, do we have any more members liking to ask questions, please?
There's no one else with their hand up, Chair, so I'm not sure whether anyone has any other questions. I can't see anything that signals anyone's trying to get my attention.
If anyone would like to ask a question, make it known now, please. No, we seem to have no hands raised. Okay, if all members are in agreement with the recommendations outlined within the report, shall we? Are we all for it? Do we all agree? It seems that we all agree. Okay, that's agreed then. We'll need to move on to item 6 then, which is the A13 widening project. And can I ask the officers to introduce the report, please?
Certainly, thanks, Chair. It's Anna Reesgate speaking. So this is a regular report to this committee in relation to the A13. Section 3 onwards of the report sets out the current position. The most significant issue to report since this item was considered at the last PTR meeting at the beginning of December relates to a COVID outbreak at the site just prior to Christmas, which forced an early shutdown for the Christmas break of the site. There was more staff needing to isolate, which meant that we had reason that the site couldn't be operated safely, so early shutdown was necessary. Work is now back up to approximately 80% of productivity, with all safety precautions in place and following all government advice and guidance. Structured work has progressed and earthworks, although with the recent poor weather, there are limits on activities that can be undertaken in extreme temperatures. We are currently programming the demolition of some of the former structures on the site, and it's anticipated that the new Horndon Road footbridge will be open in the coming weeks to the members of the public. Cost review work is a work in progress, as set out in section 3.8. In terms of programme, completion is currently programmed for March 2022, although the team is looking at ways to bring programme back to a road open date of December 21. And 3.2 sets out the provisions which apply to programme acceptance, which we've discussed before. When the contractor submits a programme, there are limited reasons or grounds for the council in suing the NEC3 contract to reject the programme. But as I say, work is progressing to look at ways to bring the road open date forward. And that's pretty much the update for this month, Chair.
Okay, good evening, Anna, and thank you for the report. There's just before I hand over to questions from members, do we have a clearer understanding of the overspend figure? And whatever the overspend figure amount is, are Thurrock residents expected to pick up the cost? And how does council propose to claim this taxation on Thurrock residents?
Okay, so as I've mentioned already, Chair, that the cost reprofiling exercise is a work in progress. So once that information is finalised, and we will report it back to the earliest opportunity at Standards and Audit and both PTR. As you're aware, there's a standing item on both committees. With regard to the funding gap, again, that's a work in progress. We're having lots of discussions with various different organisations and departments about the funding gap. And again, it's a work in progress that will be reported back to this committee and Standards and Audit when further information is known.
Thank you, Anna. I'm fully aware that there's a cost review, and it's a work in progress of the finalised figure. But I think the latter part of my question is, how does council propose to claim this taxation on Thurrock residents? Now, are Thurrock residents expected to pick up the cost for this overspend?
Thank you, Chair. So first of all, the figures for the scheme won't be finalised until the actual scheme is complete. So let's just focus on the fact that any cost profiling at the moment is just that, it's estimations and cost profiling. So finalised figures are known after the event, not before the finalised date. And in relation to any funding gap, as far as I'm aware, no decisions have been made at this time about where that funding gap is going to come from, and therefore I'm not able to answer your question about whether council residents are going to be taxed or not, because no decision has been taken.
Okay, thank you, Anna. So we really can't, know whether this funding gap or how this funding gap is going to be filled. I just sincerely hope that it's not going to be via taxation to Thurrock residents. But thank you for your response. Okay, I'm sure we can open the floor to members, and I see Councillor Kerrin's hand up again. Kenneth, can you just confirm that Councillor Kerrin was first up?
That's correct, yes, Councillor Kerrin had his hand first.
Councillor Kerrin, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for this report, Anna. Firstly, in information where we've been having some dialogue about this, I note that land purchase costs have been reduced by 800,000 since since the original budget and up until July last year, and I want to say that's a really encouraging development. I also note that Thurrock Council costs have decreased by 180,000 between the original budget and July 20. Could you outline how that was achieved, please?
the first person of the evening to say I'm on mute. Sorry for that. So in relation to land acquisitions, there is still some land acquisition that will be required. We've had some additional land acquisition recently for further utilities diversions. So the cost profile that you've seen would have been the cost profile as against the programme, and the savings that were met at that point. It doesn't necessarily mean that they will be savings met at the end of the project. So I fully expect Thurrock Council costs to go up because we have more resource on the project. And I also expect land costs and acquisition to go up because we still have compensation to settle in terms of land taken. And we are, as I mentioned earlier, taking further land for further utilities diversionary work. So that's not a final figure. That is a figure as at the date of July last year.
Thank you for that. I still, because you know, I look at this thoroughly, and I look for the positives as well as sort of the well publicised negatives of the programme. So please keep working on that to try and keep reducing costs. I also sort of note that there were 711 compensation events issued. What are they? Why are they issued? How much? Who pays? And who receives? In that order, please.
So, sorry, could you repeat that question for me?
Yeah, a 711 compensation event. What is it? Why does it happen? How much does it cost? Who pays? And who receives the money?
Okay.
It was in a document I've seen which said that the contractor has issued a 711 compensation event.
111 compensation events. Okay. So we've talked about compensation events before. Generally, I thought we were talking about, for a moment, compensation events in relation to land, which is a different matter entirely. So this is compensation events under the NEC3 contract. So as at that date, there were 711 compensation events. Compensation events are matters where issues arise or events occur which are out with the scope of the contract that's already been agreed between the parties. So compensation events for us would be paid either by the council to Kia, to Atkins, who are the council's designers, and sometimes to ACOM, who are the council's contract administrators. They can be for a range of issues. They can be, for example, because we only programmed for 3 quantity surveyors to assess compensation events, but we need 5. So there is an amendment required to ACOM's contract to increase the number of compensation quantity surveyors we need to assess compensation events. It may be things like a further utility diversion is required, therefore Kia have to do some ground preparation works. That wasn't within the original scope of the contract. It may be amendments to design. So Atkins may be required to redesign the lighting ducts because the standard has changed since the original design and it doesn't conform with current standards today. That requires a redesign, rework, and therefore would trigger a compensation event to the design team. So lots of different instances. It's important to note that not all compensation events trigger a payment. Some of them can be a negative compensation event, not too often, but sometimes they can be, and sometimes they can be a nil cost. So it's a compensation event where you're swapping one thing for another and the cost is the same. You're on mute, Councillor Kerrin.
Councillor Kerrin, do you pose another question for Anna?
Yeah, yes, sorry, Chair, that was me in the mute. Thanks for pointing that out, Anna. So to date, how much has Thurrock Council paid out in compensation events, and how much do you foresee us paying out in compensation events?
Okay, I don't have those figures to hand now, and the amount of compensation events in total will be part of the cost review work that is a work in progress, so it will be reported in due course. What I can say to you is that as the scheme progresses closer to the end date, the likelihood of significant compensation events reduces, but of course we've got a COVID-19 impact which could trigger a compensation event, and at the moment that's still an ongoing situation for which the quantification can't yet be undertaken.
Sorry, Chair, can I just pray your indulgence for just to continue this thread a minute?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Chair. Similar to the point I made earlier with the active travel, could it be circulated in writing to us to date, as of today, how much we've paid out in compensation events so far, just so we can, I want to keep a handle on it so we know going forward from now, if that's possible. And finally, just as, unless you want, do you need to say something about that? Is that possible?
Well, there are still compensation events to be assessed. They are looked at and assessed on a daily basis, so it is a movable figure. Again, all I will say to you is that we are at risk of reporting piecemeal information instead of actually reporting a full picture. And the work in progress on the cost review is a work in progress, which will be reported to this committee and to Standards and Audit when that work is complete.
Yeah, I know what you're saying about piecemeal, but I think the way things have gone, we're trying to keep a really close handle on this from, you know, the whole time I've been involved in this committee. And I think it would be, I accept it's daily. So, you know, as of today, it would then, as a committee, we can then sort of keep track of exactly where we're up to, how much we've paid out already, or how much we are going to be paying out up to this point. And I think that sort of information is really sort of crucial. Just generally to the committee, you know, we are sort of 471 days away over the original deadline for this project, which was the 28th of October 2019. We're 4 days away from what the revised date was supposed to be, which is the 12th of February, and we're 13 months away from March 2022. And that's without other delays being factored in. I think what I want to propose to this committee, we need a thorough review. And so what I'm going to propose, and I'd like Democratic Services to note this, please, a recommendation 1.2, that this committee requests that Cabinet commissions an LGA peer review of the A13 widening project. I don't know if you need to comment on that, Kenna, or just go back to the chair. I'll just mute myself for a moment.
Councillor Kerrin, I think it's a fair request asking for the current compensation that's been paid out to date, and I suggest that yes, that's done in writing. Could I ask other members how they feel about what Councillor Kerrin has just requested? Have we got any other member like to speak?
Chair, Councillor Gerrish has his hand raised.
Please, Councillor Gerrish, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think it's a good suggestion from Councillor Kerrin. Clearly, there are some major issues that we've come up against through the course of this project, and it feels like there are probably lessons to learn, both positive and negative, in terms of how to approach these kind of major infrastructure projects here in Thurrock. I think an LGA review where it's used can be a very positive thing. I think we've seen them in other areas of the council where we really do look to the way that we work, have that thorough review, and then bring forward plans for either improvement or to celebrate kind of the work that we do. And I think it's important in cases like this that we really do shine a light on the processes that we've gone through, the decisions that we've made, and where we could have had opportunities to make those decisions better. So I think it's a positive suggestion, Chair, and I'd more than happily support an amendment to the recommendations to add that in. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gerrish. I do feel that we need to, you know, really closely monitor these major projects that are brought to Thurrock, because of the reasons being, you know, the A13, the massive overspend, projects that we'll be moving on to shortly, the Stamford-le-Hope train station. It just seems that whatever major project that sort of lands in our lap, we just continue to, I don't know, to see failure, you know, and if that failure in terms of cost is reflected on the people of Thurrock. That just simply isn't fair. You know, we've seen delays. We've seen, you know, a barrage of mistakes, really. And I would say, yes, we certainly do need to, you know, closely monitor all these major projects that come to Thurrock. So I've got I will absolutely go with Councillor Kerrin's, you know, requests. So yes, you have my backing on that as well.
Chair, could I just ask Councillor Kerrin to clarify that wording for me, please?
Yes, please, Councillor
Yes.
Kerrin, could you please do that
Yes.
for Kenna, please?
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Chair. And what I was proposing is this committee requests that Cabinet commissions an LGA peer review into the A13 widening project. I'll just keep myself off mute for a minute in case you need to come back on that, Kenna. It takes me a long time. I'm muted.
Thank you, Chair. I've noted.
Kenna is.
I mean, if this is obviously something that members would like to put forward, then obviously we can obviously members can put forward additional recommendations. I mean, I don't know if Andy's got any comments that he may like to come in and obviously maybe give his view.
Thank you, Kenna. Would you like to interject, Andy, please?
Chair, I think that the request is clear, what members are asking for. Kenna has advised on the process of you adding that to the basket of recommendations this evening, or indeed taking a vote on that as a separate recommendation if you wish to do that. But I think that the request from Councillor Kerrin has been made quite clearly.
Thank you, Andy. Is there any other comments from members, please? Any hands up, Kenna?
No, Chair, no. Oh, Councillor Van Dijk just raised his hand.
Okay, Councillor Van Dijk's now with us. Okay, Councillor Van Dijk, could you please ask your question?
Yeah, it's just a question. Is there a cost to the LGA? How much does that cost, if there is a cost?
Fair point, Councillor Van Dijk. Are there any cost implications of this peer review? Maybe Andy could come back on that.
Chair, the honest answer is as I'm unsure, and certainly as to if there would be or an amount. But my gut feeling is that there would be a cost of employing the LGA to undertake the review. But I can't say how much that would be. But clearly we can find that out.
Okay, if we could find that out, I mean, you know, if it was to, you know, severely bump up the overspend, I'm not sure. Are there any other senior officers? Anna, would you like to comment on that?
I don't really have anything further to add, Councillor Allen. I think, you know, we've talked a lot about the lessons learned on this project, and we've talked a lot about the historical decisions that have been made that have led to the, you know, the current situation. Not one single issue has led to this position. I think since September last year, there has been a very different, well, September 2018 now, sorry, not last year. 2019, sorry, there has been a very different approach to project management on the scheme, and a lot of the issues that we're seeing today are kind of issues that are related to the historic decisions that have been made. I think one of the big things that is a broader issue out with the A13 project, and is, you know, touches on the issues that you've talked about already about other major projects, is that when the government or the LEP provide funding for these schemes, they give deadlines for when it's expended, or it has to be expended. And it's those deadlines that are driving some of the decisions and some of the behaviours, rather than extending deadlines on grant funding to enable the appropriate decisions to be made. And that's something that is out with the council. It's something that sits with agencies external to the council, and that would be one of the key lessons that needs to be learned and fed back.
Chair, Councillor Van Day has his hand raised.
Well, it was because it was a large pause. Was I? That just went by then. So I was wondering if anyone else has experienced the same deafness that I just got. But I just, while I'm here anyway, I agree with Councillor Allen that maybe we should at least inquire what the cost might be for this LGA and pause for pushing it through tonight.
Thank you to both Anna and Councillor Van Day. I think what we all share concerns with regarding this project is either very little or no audit trail. Anna, do you think that further escalation of the overspend will climb as time goes on? And I know we have to take the pandemic into consideration. But do you feel that it will further escalate as further time goes by?
Thank you, Chair. It's difficult to say. I think that we have a good understanding of what the key risks on the project are. Obviously, we've reported previously drainage structures and utilities diversions as being three key risks that the project was carrying, and the issues relating to those three key risks were both in terms of historic issues in the ground, design issues and the need to redesign, and standards, and they have led to a significant number of compensation events that we talked about before. I think we have made significant progress on the structures, and I think if you drive through the road you can actually see that now. You know, the main structures are in situ, and we're getting ready to demolish the previous structures. So I think the risk in relation to the structures has probably largely fallen away. I think the drainage work is progressing. We had to stop that over Christmas. We've had to stop that at the moment because of current ground conditions. So that might cause an impact and a short further delay. The COVID impact added 3 weeks onto the programme, from having to shut the site down early and then having a slow start up. So we don't know what's going to happen with that. And the final issue relates to utilities diversions, and we are still having significant issues with utility companies. And again, that is something which is largely outside of our control. We've got a mitigation plan, we're implementing it, we're reviewing it, we're having risk reduction meetings with all parties. You know, we are doing everything we can to minimise and mitigate any of those impacts. But unfortunately, as we've talked before, a lot of the issues relate to historic matters that are inherent now in the project, and we've got to mitigate rather than eradicate.
Thank you, Anna. I just hope that, you know, it's not going to be reflected on the people of Thurrock again. I can't say enough that, you know, they shouldn't really be accountable for the failings, let's say. Have we got any more? Is there any more members that would like to ask questions? Have we got any more hands up? Kenna, please.
Councillor Van Day has his hand up, so I'm not sure if he wishes to ask a question.
Councillor Van Day, have you got any further questions, or was that hand up from earlier?
It was up from earlier, sorry about that. But whilst I'm here once again, you didn't mention anything about wildlife, Anna. Are there any problems with animals? Because there was originally, wasn't there?
We had issues with adders in the summer, and we had some members of the team that were bitten, and we had lost time injuries as a consequence of that. But largely the ground earthworks are done now. and we've had possession of the land required to deliver the scheme for some time. So I don't foresee that that's an ongoing issue, but let's see what happens in the summer, who knows.
Thank you for that. I'm just part of the animal welfare group now at Thurrock, so I thought I'd inquire. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Van Day, for your question, and thank you, Anna, for your response. I would say that there always seems to be a snake in the mix somewhere. Right. If we've exhausted all the debate, and would we like to move on, members? Are all members in agreement with the recommendations outlined in the report?
Chair, as a just sort of brief point, I know Councillor Kerrin had raised an alternative wording. Could we just clarify how we'll deal with that?
Yes, please do, Councillor Gerrish.
Thank you, members. What I was going to just come in and ask, once members have obviously agreed recommendation 1.1, just as the chair was obviously going into that, I was then going to come in, if that was okay, and obviously say Councillor Kerrin did propose recommendation 1.2. We'd then need to see, obviously, if that was seconded, and then go through the process of obviously seeing if members are happy to take that forward. If all members are in agreement, then we can obviously add that on as well.
Thanks, Ken. Thanks, Chair.
Ken, I'd just like clarification in regards to the LGA peer review and the cost. So if the senior officer Andy could come back with some indication into the cost and how that cost would be met, if that cost would be met by council.
Yes, quite happy to take that one away, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Andy. Okay, if we've exhausted that, do we move on to item 8, Kenna?
So is it agreed then?
Sorry, Chair, just to clarify, are you agreeing Councillor Kerrin's recommendation of 1.2 this evening?
I agree.
Or would you like us to go away and come back?
I agree with it in part, obviously. I think it's a fair request. However, I am a little bit concerned into the cost and how that cost would be met.
Chair, could officers not go away and get some of that information and then come back to committee if you know, we can? I'm concerned about that cost aspect as well. Is that not possible?
Chair, if I may, maybe what we can do is amend 1.2 to say that we go away to undertake an LGA peer review, but subject to identifying the cost of that and agreeing it with the chair and vice chair of this committee potentially.
Yeah, that sounds great, Anna. Thanks for that interjection. Yeah, I think that's probably our best bet, because we at current we don't know how much the LGA peer review would cost. So if we could really go away and find out about that and how cost will be met, so who would meet that cost, and then we can proceed thereon. Are members in agreement with that?
The Vice Chair here, I am.
No.
Right. I mean, I don't. Kenna, do you think we should take a vote on it, or just to see how many members are in agreement and those against?
Yeah, I think perhaps the way forward is obviously for Councillor Kerrin to put his recommendation, and we go to the vote and obviously how many members are in favour and how many obviously are against.
Again, I'm in agreement with the recommendation, but based on how much it's going to cost and who's going to meet that cost. Because at the moment we don't know who's going to meet that cost, and we don't know how much it's going to be. It could be a vast amount of money, or it could be very little. But I think we should find out how much it's going to cost and who's going to meet that cost. So it's awkward for me being chair because I want to go with the recommendation, but I want to go with a recommendation knowing how much it's going to cost and who's going to meet that cost. So, you know, it's kind of put me on the fence. It's kind of put me, you know, neither for and against. It's you know, and it's awkward, you know, abstaining from a vote. But that's the position I've been put in tonight. So as chair, it's not something that I enjoy. But I suppose if we could go over to a vote, and I'm pretty much forced of sitting on the fence on this one, not knowing the cost and who's going to meet it. So that's how I feel.
Good. Chair, sorry to interject, but I've got my hand up and I'm not too sure that it's been spotted or not. The situation which we find ourselves listening to the debate is that there is a substantive request for an additional recommendation from Councillor Kerrin, and subsequently there's been a debate around that and how it might be modified around costs. I got the impression from Councillor Kerrin that he wasn't necessarily happy with those amendments, but perhaps Councillor Kerrin could consider that. If he's not, then Chair, I suggest that we go to the vote on Councillor Kerrin's specific recommendation. If that's carried, then that's carried. If not, if a member wanted to put up an alternative recommendation at that point, then that might well be the way forward. But it depends, Councillor Kerrin, I suggest, on whether or not you're happy with any of the amendments that have been put in, or whether you want to just repeat and have considered your first wording in relation to a recommendation 1.2.
Yeah, thanks for.
Thank you, Andy. If I could just come back to Councillor Kerrin. Councillor Kerrin, can I ask you, are you concerned of how much this is going to cost and where it's coming from? So if you could answer my question.
I'll tell you what I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about the delay and the cost we've had so far, and I'm also concerned that even suggesting a peer review of a project which has caused has been completely overrun, completely overspent, that we're even debating whether we should have this review of it. I think it's crucial that we have this review of it. Like I said, we're days away from what the revised deadline for it was. We're waiting 13 months for the next revised one, with caveats that it could go further. And I think this committee should grab the bull by the horns tonight and say we need this review. And that's why I've listened to everyone's point, and I've listened to the members and also the way the officers have put it, because I spend a lot of time in my shadow role dealing with officers, and I have every respect for them. But I feel strongly that we need to tonight say that we need this review. We need to learn the lessons. We need to make sure going forward we're all united on it, and that's why, subject to someone seconding the recommendation, I'd like to put it through unedited, please.
Again, Councillor Kerrin, thank you for that. But it's just it does come down to the cost again, and obviously I'm not saying that you don't care about the cost, but there's obviously going to be a cost implication, and we're not aware of how much that cost could be. I mean, it could possibly go into many thousands, but if you could just clarify that, I know we've got a massive overspend already, but adding further thousands for someone to pick up the cost, I'd just like to be, I'd like some clear idea of how much such a review would cost.
Yeah.
Chair, if I may, I think it might be worth if we go to the vote. If I perhaps read out Councillor Kerrin's suggested recommendation for 1.2, and then see if there's a seconder, and then go through each member individually and see how they vote.
Okay, if we can do that, Kenneth, thank you. I will say that it's very awkward for me. I would like to see the review, but I would also like to understand the costings and who's going to meet the costs. So unfortunately for me, I've been pushed on the fence this time, so I would ideally have to abstain the vote, not really wanting to do that, but that's the position I've been put in tonight, and that's how I feel.
Okay, so I, Chair, if you don't mind, is it okay if I go to the vote?
Yes, thank you, Kenna.
So I have the wording as follows: that Planning, Transport and Regeneration Overview and Scrutiny Committee requests Cabinet to commission an LGA peer review into the A13 widening project. Councillor Kerrin, is that the wording that you're happy with? That's the word you proposed?
Yes, thank you, Ken. And I'll just look for a seconder.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for that recommendation, please?
I'm happy to second that.
Councillor Gerrish, thank you. Members, I'm going to call out your name. If you could let me know whether you're in favour or against this recommendation, please. Councillor John Allen?
I abstain on this vote. Thank you, Ken.
Councillor Van Day?
Against.
Councillor Anderson?
Against.
And Councillor Potter?
Against.
Councillors Kerrin and Gerrish, I presume you're both in favour, as you obviously proposed and seconded?
I haven't changed my mind in that time.
No. Thank you. Chair, just to let you know, from the vote, you have 3 members against, 2 for, and 1 abstained.
All right, thank you, Ken, and thank you all members. Can I still ask that we get senior officers to go away and see how much such a peer review would cost, and we can look at this, in the near foreseeable future?
Chair, yes, as I said earlier, I'm happy to take that away as an action.
Yeah, please, I'd appreciate if you would, Andy, give us some idea and how obviously that cost would be met. Who's going to pay for that? And that would be great. So I'd very much appreciate it. Thank you, Andy. All right, have we got any more questions regarding Councillor Kerrin's request? Any more comments or questions? Kenna, no more questions?
No, Chair, no, there's no hands raised. I think you're good to move on.
Okay, so we're moving on to item 8 then, which is the Integrated Transport Block Capital Programme for 2021/22, highways maintenance allocation and programme for 2021/22. Can I ask officers to introduce the report, please?
Chair, sorry to interrupt, but you've skipped through item 7. The Stamford Le Hope interchange report.
Oh, I am sorry, Andy. I'm ahead of myself here. Sorry. So item 7. Yes, sorry. It's the Stamford Le Hope interchange update. Again, can I ask officers to introduce the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. It's me again. So this again is a regular item brought at the request of this committee. The Phase 1 station is due to be considered by Planning Committee on Thursday this week and is recommended for approval. Phase 2, which is the Daybreak Windows Transport Hub site, designs have been submitted to the planning team for feedback and advice to inform a subsequent planning application, which is expected to be submitted in late spring. We are expecting to issue tender documents to the 4 preferred panel tenderers before the end of this month. Budget and programme are currently on track as set out in the report, and we have some images to show you that Kenna will put up on the station design and the transport hub as far as they progress. So members, this is a view of the site from across the road, south of the Daybreak Window site, looking across. The River Hope is on the north side with Chancery Crescent, and this is the south side of the railway crossing here, where the image is taken from. As you can see, the station with a canopy over on the left-hand side and the improved footbridge that spreads travellers along the platform and moves pedestrians through the station in a safe way. Keller, do you want to move on? Thank you. So that's the ground arrangements drawing. You can see on the north side of the site that we're making use of the existing station building. You'll recall that the previous design was a podium deck built out over the River Hope. This scheme keeps the design within the existing footprint, and because we've been able to move the transport hub across the road, it creates an increased public realm at the front of the station, and doesn't, shoehorn so much infrastructure in what was a very small congested space. Kenna, do you want to move on one? So again, this is from across the road, looking across London Road into the station site. You can see the gate line there, ticket office on the left. There is a coffee shop booth proposed for the right-hand side, and then people will move through those barriers and move along the platform. Kenna, can you move on one, please? So these are just various designs showing what it's like, the experience from being underneath the canopy in the station. It's light permeable, so it should be quite a light and airy space. Next one, Kenna, please. This is the view from the station side across to the transport hub. So you can see the bus turnaround facility and bus waiting areas with the car park to the rear. We do have a landscaping plan that we are proposing, but because of CCTV coverage and footage, we're not sure that the trees that are demonstrated there along the centre of the car park can remain because of the visibility needed for safety for the cameras. That's something that's still a work in progress. But you can see we've got a canopy type arrangement matching the station there for the bus waiting facility. And just to the south of the drawing there on the far right hand side is the cycle parking and charging. We're hoping to put some green recharge, electricity charging points for bicycles and for vehicles in there. Next one, Kenna. Again, that's just an aerial view, so you can see the scheme in its entirety. And I think that might be the last one. That's just the general arrangements drawing again that shows the car parking facility and how the buses will turn around and wait in that locality. Happy to take questions, Chair.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you for the report. And it certainly looks a better design than the former cantilever. There's just a few slight concerns that I've got now. Where the old station was in service, I do believe that we had buses and taxis being able to pull up, on the right side of the road where the ticket office and that was where people could be safely dropped off. With the bus terminal being on the opposite side, I take it that taxis picking up and dropping off will pick up and drop off over that side. Will they have a designated area? And again, coming back to the public safety aspect of them, being dropped off on the opposite side of the road and having to cross the road, have we got something implemented to make sure that the public safety whilst crossing the road?
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'm not sure about whether there's a designated area for taxi or vehicle drop-off, but we're at an early enough point in the design that that's something I can feed back to the project manager for consideration. The second thing is that we are undertaking a ROSPA audit, which is the road safety organisation that comes in and audits our schemes. So we are in discussions with them about how people will safely move between the two sites. And again, that's a work in progress.
Thank you, Anna. I'm sure that the residents of Stamford-le-Hope are just itching to see something implemented, because this has been running for so long. looking at the design, it looks absolutely fantastic. And what can I say? I just can't wait until it's implemented. But if you could pick up on the public safety aspect of passengers being dropped off and picked up, so a drop off and pick up point for taxis, as well as the bus terminal, that would be fantastic. And I'm quite happy to open up to members' questions. And again, I go to my favourite Labour person, Councillor Kerrin.
For a minute, Chair, I thought you was going to name Councillor Gerrish. I was getting worried then. Thank you very much for the report. Now, when we consider the discussion we had on the previous item and the rigmarole around, opening up review and things like that, I have a real problem with the lack of figures on here and the budget paragraph. And I'll break that down into sort of two bits. Firstly, in terms of the budget, I don't know why there's no concrete figures in this report, and they only seem to come in minutes when people are asked. So the figures I sort of have most recently is the last time I questioned the portfolio holder in full council, where he said it can't go above 20 million. And then in December's PTR, the minutes have you and I and a jockey in between 19.4 million and 19.6 million. So just before I move on to specific elements of the budget paragraph, could we have an update on the figures, please? And then they will at least be in the minutes then.
Yeah, sure. So at the moment, it wasn't the original budget because additional funding was allocated to compensate for the podium design deck of the previous scheme. So the original budget envelope was around 16 million. That was then increased to 19.6, I think was the figure. We are within the budget. We have not spent the budget. I don't have the current breakdown of figures in front of me here. That's the responsibility of the project manager. But I can tell you that we haven't spent the budget. The problem with putting figures in before we go to tender is then members remember that figure and then the tender returns come in and we've priced the job. It's only when we test the market will we know what the anticipated build costs of this scheme are going to be. We have brought in a design team to design it with the budget envelope that we have in mind, and they have been on a clear scope in relation to that. But until we test the market and get the returns on the tenders, we are not going to know where we are in terms of the cost of delivering the scheme against the remaining budget. And then, often there's variances in the costs, often there are variances in the budgets, and actually then the process becomes one of value engineering the scheme to bring the cost envelope back down so it's within that budget cost. But what I can tell you is, lessons learned on the A13, we are deliberately not going to market until we have detail, because a lack of detail means that there is greater risk in the tender process, and that risk is then put on the council. So we are waiting to go to the market until we have a sufficient level of detail, that the scheme is sufficiently developed enough that we can then go on a fixed price tender so that we know what we are going to be paying for the delivery of this scheme.
Thank you for that. Now, the trouble is then, so does that mean when I got told in full council that it can't go over 20 million, that is something that shouldn't have been said? Because from what you've said, we have to wait until we've gone to tender and that. So are you saying there shouldn't be any figures at all, because that's why there's none in the report? Or was it fine for it to be said on public record that it wouldn't go over 20 million? Because quite possibly it could do, couldn't it? Because like you've said, it would you can't say anything until it's gone to tender.
Well, if we apply that logic, Councillor Kerrin, we can't really say any figures until a scheme's built and delivered, and then we do the look back, and then we know what the actuals are. So I'm not entirely convinced that's the right way, and it's not really appropriate for me to comment on what other members have said in a council meeting. What I can say to you is what I've said already, that we know what our budget envelope is, that we have designed the scheme and instructed our consultants to design a scheme that fits and delivers that budget envelope. If it doesn't, when we get the tender prices back, then there is a process of value engineering to see what elements in the scheme can be changed to bring the cost of the delivery of the scheme back within that budget envelope. And it's not 20 million, it's 19.6, as far as I'm aware.
Well, yeah, as I said, so we are talking figures, but they're not getting committed to the report, and that's the sort of issue I have in terms of openness and transparency. And the 20 million is in public record through council minutes. So, you know, we have to. I'm not making these figures up. I didn't just, you know, I'm taking it from public record, which is out there for all to see. With the budget paragraph, I sort of gathered from that 5 different questions. Okay, so 3.5 is the paragraph it is. So when will the high level estimated project cost evaluation take place? When are the 2 checkpoints? When is the final design approval? When is the check with independent estimates taking place? And when is the benchmark to evaluate the tender submissions? I think, unless other members have read that paragraph in detail like I have, I picked out 5 questions from that, which we really need to know about.
So we've undertaken the first of the high-level estimated project cost evaluation exercises as part of the design. The second one will be done as part of the tender exercise. We will evaluate the tenders when they're returned. And then what we've done is instructed an independent estimator for when the tender exercises are returned, so that we can do a quality check on the tender pricing, which is why we are intending to bring an independent estimator in. So that's to support the tender evaluation exercise. So in the same way, if we apply the logic to the A13 on compensation events, we have a compensation event, Kia have quantity surveyors that price it up, that goes onto the system, our quantity surveyors do a check and evaluation of that before the figure is agreed. It's the same process. The people that will return the tender will have their figures, they'll have had quantity surveyors to produce those figures, and we will appoint an independent estimator to sense check those figures to get a greater level of understanding of how they've been arrived at. And this is all part of the lessons learned from the A13 to make sure we get the quality and we get it right from the bottom, like from the start of the project in terms of its delivery.
Thank you. So from that, did you say the high level estimation project evaluation has taken place?
One of them has. One of them
Right.
has, and that was done at concept design stage.
So how far away are we from the 2 checkpoints?
Well, we'll have 1 checkpoint when we go out to tender and another one from the independent estimator.
And from that point, when are we looking at final design approval?
So final design approval, well, we get the planning permission, all being well, without wanting to predetermine the outcome of committee. But if things go according to plan, we'll get the planning permission this week. We then have a further stage of design for ACOM to do some detailed drawings to inform the tender. We've got all of the tender documentation ready to go. We're expecting that to go out week commencing the 22nd of February. They'll have a 6-week return date on that. And at that point, we will then be doing the evaluation exercise. So that takes us into April.
And then from April, the benchmark to evaluate the tender submissions?
I don't have that information in my head, I'm afraid. I'd have to go away and look at the programme. Okay,
is that something that could be circulated to members afterwards?
Yeah.
Chair, I've been really pleased with your indulgence. I have got other questions, but I can see a Stamford councillor is waiting. I would like to concede my place, and if I can come back afterwards, Chair.
I can't see why not, Councillor Kerrin. I'd just like to just ask for a little bit of clarification from Anna, with the original budget being 16 million the new budget estimated at 19.6, which is a difference of 3.6 million. I'll take it that 3.6 million would be cost to buying the Daybreak Windows site or covering that cost. I just wanted some kind of assurance from you, Anna, that budget envelope of 19.6 million won't be exceeded with this project. Have we got any assurance from yourself that budget envelope will not be exceeded?
That's the aim, but I can't give you that guarantee until I see the tenders.
Okay, and as far as you know, Anna, is there any more tweaking needs to be done to the initial design? I mean, I have brought up about the taxis and pick up and drop off. Also, you know, ensuring public safety whilst crossing the road to obtain the, you know, the ticket office and so on the platforms. So would there be any more tweaking as such that needs to be done to the final design, which would perhaps put cost up a little again, or do we aim to deliver within that budget envelope again?
As I've already said, we aim to deliver in the budget envelope. That's the scope that has been given to the consultants. That is certainly the cost profile that has been developed by the project manager. They've been on clear instructions at every stage that the budget is sacrosanct. There are probably some changes and tweaks to be made to the transport hub, not to the station phase 1 side, because that is going through planning and hopefully that's now in a final design. The transport hub is at pre-application stage. So based on the feedback we get from the planners, there may be a need to make some changes. Based on the safety audit that we get back from ROSPA, there may be a need to make some changes. At all stages, we've been engaging with key stakeholders, including DP World, our transport team, the local residents, all of whom, and the ward councillors, all of whom have provided feedback to us. So we have done everything we can to obtain feedback and implement those comments and feedback as much as possible in the design.
Lovely, thank you, Anna, for clarification. I do believe we've got another member waiting. Kenna, who do we hand across to? I can't see any hands up.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Anderson has his hand raised.
Yeah, Councillor Anderson, if you'd like to pose your question or comments.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Councillor Kerrin as well for yielding some time. Although the question I had down here was when will the 2 high-level cost evaluation exercises take place? And I think Councillor Kerrin asked, and that was answered. But I still wanted to still just comment that thank you for the pictures you showed us. Like the chair said, I think that it looks really positive, the pictures, and obviously the report itself says that so far all the feedback has been very positive with regard to the input of the project steering groups from residents, etc. And obviously it's really important that the resident engagement continues with this, and he's really taken into account. So yeah, that's my comment, and thank you for your report.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson.
I think I'd just like to finish on that it does absolutely look like a better overall design than the former cantilever. I know we've had to kind of spend more money, but I think we're sort of getting a much better product at the end, and like I say, I do believe that the people of Stamford have seen this project running for so long. They'll just be happy to see what's going to be delivered, and I just hope that it's delivered on time within the budget envelope, and let's get cracking, Anna. Let's get this done.
Councillor Allen, if I could just come back on something that you've just said there, that we've had to spend more money. Actually, we haven't. When we got the tenders returned for the original design with the podium and cantilever deck, the budget was needing to be increased further to 26 million. So actually, by pausing, reviewing the scheme and undertaking the design that we have, plus the acquisition of the Daybreak Windows site, it actually saves the project money.
Okay, I was just going by the original £16 million budget and the current 19.6. I don't know if you could add to the acquiring the Daybreak Windows site, which is going to house the bus station and so on. Do we have enough room over there, Anna, to look at perhaps redeveloping, and getting a little bit of the cost back? So will council actually, claw back some money through the money that they've laid out to acquire the site?
Which bit are you talking about redeveloping?
Is there going to be enough room over there, or is all of the Daybreak Windows site going to be acquired for the bus station and parking? Will the whole site be taken up?
Not necessarily. The rear part of the site may still be available for either additional parking or some other use. So that is something that officers are having conversations with various parties about currently.
Okay, so it won't be looked at or viewed at for any redevelopment of housing at all.
The problem you've got with the site, Councillor Allen, is accessibility to it. You wouldn't want to access a housing development scheme through a car park and the River Hope. There is the barrier of the River Hope on one side and the railway line on the other. So subject to overcoming that issue of crossing the River Hope into an adjacent site, then yes, there may be potential. And as I've said, that's a work in progress and officers are having discussions with various parties about that.
Absolutely, and I'll take that on board regarding the River Hope, because we've seen just recently with localised flooding, and I do believe that Neil Spate reported from Thurrock Nub News in the actual Daybreak Windows site, which was pretty much underwater. So yeah, there's obviously. Are we going to take that into consideration as well with localised flooding, the swelling River Hope, and will measures be taken to ensure that the new bus stand and the parking facility is not going to be covered in water if the River Hope decides to burst its banks?
Yeah, so work is ongoing at the moment. We've been undertaking ground investigation and survey works. We've had people out during the COVID lockdown doing that work. On the south side near the station, we were made aware about some flooding issues with residents in Chantry Crescent. We have had our contractors out to clear the riverbank there. It is actually Port of London Authority is responsible for some of that, but we have gone out and done some work to clear that locality. I'm sure there'll be some form of condition on the consent that we will need to discharge in relation to water runoff and flooding, but we are aware of it, and officers are on message that whatever we do on both sides of the road shouldn't be exacerbating a situation that is already there.
Absolutely, I do believe, it's paramount that we should take flood mitigation into consideration, because we're spending a lot of money on this project. So we need to ensure that any stage that the River Hope swells, that it doesn't breach our new project and ruin it. We don't want commuters getting wet feet, Anna.
Is that not what wellies are for?
Okay, thank you, Anna, for that. Right, I do believe that Councillor Kerrin wanted to come back. Councillor Kerrin, you want to come back on that?
Thank you very much, Chair, and Thank you, Councillor Anderson, as well for your points that you made with your Stamford hat on. Just before I ask the questions I was going to, did I hear correctly that there have been discussions about housing by the site? I just want to check that I got that right before, because I have got other questions, but I just want to check that I didn't mishear.
There's been a variety of discussions with a variety of people about potential uses for the site at the rear, which include providing a footpath link through, because there's a footpath that goes through that site all the way down along past the station and beyond the River Hope. So there's several conversations in place about a variety of elements that could come forward on that site, subject to the barriers that we've talked about, railway on one side, River Hope on the other.
Right, thank you for that. So potentially, it's not denied. Then it could be housing. Okay. Generally, are there any concerns about the different sides of the site being different heights? I understand that about half the site is about 10 feet lower, and I'm sure you can clarify that with more detail than I can. And is it also true that there are less spaces on this new site, that there will be less spaces on this site than there are currently? And are there any concerns around the River Hope, especially with sort of the trees coming out of it and, you know, the sort of design aspect of it? So could you just clarify those points for me, please, Anna?
Yeah, so there are differences between the heights on the existing C2C car park that's there and the Daybreak Windows site. That's something that is being looked at as part of the design of the transport hub. And it may be that one side is raised, which will help support the flooding issue. I don't know the detail yet. I will have to ask. That's subject to discussions with officers. But we're happy to bring back more detail about the transport hub once we've had the pre-act discussions. In relation to the number of spaces, as far as I'm aware, there is definitely no reduction in the number of spaces. If anything, there are more, because part of the justification, if you recall, for purchasing this site was that we would seek to secure additional parking for local shoppers on a shorter term basis to enable them to have short-term parking to visit the town.
Yeah, because
Councillor Curran, are you coming?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, what with other projects in the past, not necessarily ones that you've personally run, but projects you know of where there's been that kind of distance, you know, that gap between two halves of the site. I mean, are we not talking that could potentially be millions, couldn't it? I'm not
going to speculate, Councillor Kerrin. I don't know the answer to your question. I'll go away and I'll provide a written response. I don't know the answer.
Yeah, if you could please, and that'd be really helpful, because just from my knowledge of projects through the council, really, and the amount of years I've been sitting on the committee now, that sounds like something which could be potentially very, very expensive. But I'll await your information sent round to us all. Thank you for answering my questions, and thank you, Chair, for your indulgence.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Kerrin, and thank you, Anna, for your responses. Again, with the possible height difference, I'm sure. I mean, the road cannot be changed, and the current track sits at road level. So unless I can't see any change being from the level of the road to the initial bus station. I can't see that sitting higher. I could possibly see the design of the station being higher to accommodate the platform and so on, but I can't see much change in the height. And although we're not getting exact assurance that you know that the budget envelope is going to be exceeded, but we're looking at the 19.6 million total budget for the project. Now, I think Anna has said that, you know, it should not exceed that. So hopefully all the alterations that need to be made will come inside that budget envelope, will it not, Anna?
As I've said, I can't reiterate it enough. The scope of the project and the design of the project has been entirely focused on delivering this scheme within the budget that's available. I can't say any more than that. The access to the Daybreak Windows site, Councillor Allen, slopes down. So there is, Councillor Kerrin is right in what he says. There is a difference in land levels between the existing C2C car park and the Daybreak Windows site. There is. I'm not going to speculate about how we're dealing with that because I don't know the answer to the question that's been asked. So we could sit here all night coming up with ideas. I don't know the answer. I'll take it away and I'll report back.
Thank you, Anna. As it's not going to be any sort of foundations needed, I'm sure it's only going to come down to substrate to bring the level up if it does slope down. So I'm sure that the costs wouldn't come into millions. You know, I've worked on projects myself. You know, when I left school, I worked on big projects. I've worked alongside, you know, various people that operate levels, theodolites, you know, and I've done it all. So I'm sure that the cost implication wouldn't run into millions, bringing the substrate up, you know, to road level.
I'll produce a note and circulate it round to the members. That's all I can say.
Lovely, thank you for that. That's great. Okay, so have we exhausted all questions? Are there any more members that would like to ask questions on this project? Kenna, no more hands raised?
No, Chair, there's no further hands raised.
So are all members in agreement with the recommendations outlined in this report?
Agreed.
Agreed, okay.
Agreed.
That's all agreed, thumbs up, okay. Right, we can now actually move on to item 8, what I tried to jump on ahead of myself earlier. Okay, item 8 is Integrated Transport Block Capital Programme of 2021/22, Highways Maintenance Allocation and Programme for 2021/22. Can I please ask the officers to introduce the report?
Thank you, Chair. So each year the Council receives funding from the DFT to enhance transport infrastructure and service provision in the borough. And this is known as the Integrated Transport Block Capital Programme, or ITB for short. So the total ITB allocation for Thurrock in 21/22 year amounts to 971,000. The report sets out how the ITB funding will be utilised in the next financial year and the methodology to be employed to ensure that the funds are directed to areas that need it the most, which is then based upon statistical data. In addition to the ITB, each year the Council also receives funding for highway maintenance, and the DFT annual settlement for 21/22 is expected to be 1,938,000. The report again sets out how the maintenance block will be utilised. Chair, this report deals with two linked but separate service areas of the Council. Matt is with us obviously from the transport team, and Peter Wright is also with us from the highways maintenance side. I'd like to hand over to Matt in the first instance to take members through the ITB programme, and then to Peter through the maintenance block. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Lee, and over to Matt. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, as Lee sets out there, the annual allocation identified for the ITB funding is 971,000, and that is a figure that we've worked on for a number of years, and that is our kind of annual allocation that the DFT calculates for us to deliver infrastructure improvements on the network. The report sets out that the proposed areas of spend for this for the financial year 21/22. Looking through the report, what we've identified is that in previous years the allocations have been are being set out, and that this year we're looking at taking more of a policy-based approach, so that we've got a number of identified policies that inform our ITB programme every year, but it's been identified that nearly 40% of the budget wasn't covered by a policy direction. So there is an additional policy for our area intervention programme that's been identified in this report. And if you look at paragraph 3.5 and the allocations that are identified for the programme, it identifies the amount of money to be allocated across each of the areas for the programme. And the third element on that list is the area intervention programme, which is our new policy area. That table identifies a figure of 300,000, but I think that's a slight typo, and apologies for that. That should actually read at 250,000, just to align with the actual full allocation. And the emergency minor works budget should be reduced to 46, so that actually comes out of the figure of 971. So that's a slight typo, so apologies for that. But identifies those areas that we are looking to allocate the funding to. The new policy area for area intervention allows the council to look at areas of the road network that sometimes in previous years haven't had a focus. There is a Safe Routes to School programme and a road safety engineering programme, which are a data-led approach to treating areas of the road network around schools and those areas with parts of the road network where there are clusters of accidents. The area intervention programme allows us to look at other parts of the network that sometimes don't get that focus, and it allows a bit more of a robust approach across the network to enable some of those areas to gain some intervention. So that has been put forward as a new policy area, so that we've got a more defined way of informing the programme on an annual basis and utilising the fund. As you can see, there are some allocations put to areas such as emergency minor works and then passenger transport improvements, and also an allocation for enhancing walking and cycling, which will go towards supporting the active travel elements that we spoke about earlier in the meeting. So that's just a quick run through really of the 971 and how that is to be allocated across the programme. There is more detail of the schemes themselves and the programme itself in Appendix 1, but I will hand over to Peter Wright, who will probably want to say a couple of words around the maintenance block allocation.
Thank you, Matt, and welcome, Peter, if you could take over.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Matt. Yes. So the report contains the DFT maintenance block allocation, which is 1.938 million. It's the same allocation we've received for the past 5+ years. The allocation we divvy out via an asset management approach, which is set out in the asset management policy. It has to be a data-led approach because the size of the network that we have to maintain with the various assets, 545 kilometres of carriageway network alone, over 27 street lighting assets, over 100 structures. So we build it all around the asset management policy, which basically enables us to target the assets and try to ensure sort of life cycle planning and try to target the money in a way that lets the money go as far as it can really with the network that we have. So the in the appendix there, you'll see that it's split out into principal carriageways, classified roads, structures, road markings, traffic signals. And we've looked at where we've looked at the priority for the carriageways. For instance, we've had to take into consideration usage, buses, schools, HGV uses, condition of the network via scanner surveys. That all feeds into a program, which then comes up with this list. So it's very much a data-led approach. That's really it, really. Maintenance isn't a particularly interesting subject. So, yeah, any questions, I'm happy to field on it.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you, Peter. I think we often just to point out, we often speak in acronyms in these committees and on the agenda items. I mean, DFT obviously is Department for Transport. If we could just in future when we do these agenda items, if we could just, for the sake of the public, just instead of speaking in acronyms all the time, if we can just mention what DFT stands for and so on, because there's so many acronyms, and some of the public that will be listening in to the live stream will be thinking, what are they talking about? So if we could just, in future committee meetings, just let them know just once what the acronym means, and they might have a better understanding. Right. Okay. Right. We'll proceed anyway. Yes, Martin Kerrin's hand has just gone up. Again, Martin, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I was fishing for you to say I'm the favourite again, but you've only said it once tonight. Thank you for this report. And my question, after all the technicalities of the last two items, and really, I just want to talk about resident engagement, really. In 6.2, it's been said about local residents, interest groups and key stakeholders being influential in providing regular input for the evidence base. Really, my question is, how have local residents been consulted? I get that there's bus user groups and things like that, but which community forums have been visited? What kind of uptake in suggestions have there been? And crucially, how have they been influential? Have you got any concrete examples of decisions that have been made or changed based on feedback from either residents, community forums, or bus user groups? And I'll just mute myself.
Thanks, Councillor. Yeah, the team have during the COVID period resurrected the community forum meetings with chairs of the chairs and vice chairs of the forums to discuss issues that are prevalent within those locations and to discuss the scheme proposals coming forward. So the team utilised those discussions certainly to gain feedback from a wider forum through the chair and the vice chair to understand if there are any particular issues and concerns that could be integrated into the programme. Certainly, we utilise the feedback and historic. Some of this is historic stuff that we've kind of got on lists that informs and comes forward and informs our programmes over time. So things that have come through from the local access forum and a bus user group, as you mentioned, and certainly the bus user group are very influential in kind of identifying where there's a need for either new bus stops to be provided or for existing infrastructure to be improved, enhanced and renewed. The same can be said really for the walking and cycling network, where we get feedback for our rights of way colleagues, and we've also just recently set up on the consultation portal a walking and cycling consultation portal page to enable people to provide their input into what they feel is needed in terms of improvements for walking and cycling. That has again been used to inform the active travel element that we spoke about earlier, but will also be used to inform the use of the 50,000 allocation that's identified through the programme. So yeah, so there are a varied number of ways that we can gain input and look at what's needed. One of the key things that we've done actually sits out slightly outside of the ITB, but one of the key things that we've delivered recently are the new wayfinding posts that you might see around. Certainly in Stamford, they're going through East Tilbury, and I think they are to be potentially delivered on a wider basis, where there was a lot of feedback from people actually saying that the signage on walking and cycling networks wasn't particularly good. There was no kind of time or distance on certain signs, so there's been a whole raft of and a program of stuff delivered as a result of that kind of feedback, so that people can get an indication of how far a distance it is to a destination, and potentially how long it should take to walk or cycle as well. They've been received really well, and that's come through as a result of the feedback that we gained from various groups.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I recognise you gave specific examples there, like the signage and that, which, as you said, has come. That was sort of, as you were waiting, I was waiting for that sort of the thing where I could say, oh, that came from residents, and that's good to hear. Just going forward, more as an offer of help, really, from myself as a ward councillor, but also other ward councillors. If sort of post meeting, you could let us know which sort of community groups were more active in taking part in giving you suggestions, then let us know, because, like, for example, in my own patch, you know, we have the Thameside Community Forum and the Seabrook Residents Association, and if either of those groups didn't take part, for example, or didn't feed in, then, you know, myself, Councillor Fish and Councillor Apothecary would push that on your behalf as well. And that's not just unique to Grays Riverside. Every councillor, irrespective of their party, you know, has an interest in their ward. So perhaps sort of after the meeting, and if there are any community associations that were particularly good in getting their suggestions across, let us know that as well, and we can, you know, because I would probably go and visit some of them and then take ideas back to my own community forum to increase engagement. So it's not so much a question. Well, obviously the question is, if you could, would you be able to give us the information of which groups were most active in taking part? But then, you know, use ward councillors, because we all live in Thurrock, we all go to our community groups. So let us help you to get engagement up.
So, thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I'll go back to the team, the guys that are involved in those meetings on a more kind of detailed basis, and ask for a bit of feedback from them and feed that back to you guys.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Councillor Karen. Yes, you're still my favourite. Right. Again, we're talking acronyms all the time. The ITB, Integrated Transport Block. Just need to, you know, alliterate the, you know, public that are listening don't know what these acronyms mean. So if we could just, you know, touch on them briefly so they can understand. Sometimes it's hard for me to even understand, and I have to look again at what the acronym means. So for future meetings, that'd be great. Right, have we got any more members, Kenna, that would like to ask questions on this item agenda?
There's no one with their hand raised, Chair.
Okay, that's I just wanted to touch on probably to Peter with the £971,000 the ITB funding. We've got 250,000 on road safety engineering. Can you just touch briefly on what the road safety engineering you know, what it's about? So what that 250,000, that £250,000 will actually be spent on?
Certainly, Councillor. Yeah. So the road safety and engineering programme is based around a data-led approach in terms of identifying where there are clusters of accidents or severity of accidents on our road network, and we utilise the police database to identify where those incidents occur. And there is a priority kind of calculation that identifies where interventions and schemes are needed in any given year to identify improvement, enhancement, safety schemes that will be designed with a vision to make roads safer and reduce those accidents and incidents on the road network. The appendix that accompanies the report identifies the areas to be addressed going forward with this year's funding. A128 being a key area for intervention through the road safety engineering programme this year, clearly because of the number of accidents that have been recorded, specifically within a bespoke stretch of the A128, and then there will be other areas that need to be addressed, and we are just waiting on the finalisation of that police accident data to identify exactly where the next kind of priority areas are. But we're certainly focusing on the A128 with the funding that's identified this year, and then when we get the final figures from the police database, then the other areas will be set as well. But it basically works on the kind of priority areas in terms of where accidents have occurred over a period of time.
Thank you, Peter, for the further information. It's quite useful to know where the money's actually going. So, yeah. if you wouldn't mind going through the rest, safer routes to school and what that implies as well.
Yeah, Safer Routes to School programme is looking at the school locations across the borough and how we can improve the routes to and from school to make them safer and to make them more attractive and accessible in terms of encouraging sustainable travel. So we want more people to be walking and cycling to schools, because obviously that's seen as a healthy activity. It reduces congestion around school locations, and it helps, in terms of the overall environment around schools. So what we've got is a set criteria again that identifies all schools in the borough, assessments done around those school locations. We also take into account the school travel plan that's been produced by the school, which then helps to identify and inform certain measures and criteria that can be applied around that school location, and that's scored up to identify the list of schools to be addressed and treated in any given year. This year, again, the programme identifies 7 schools in total. We had set a target of around 10 schools to be treated each year. 7 are identified in the programme at the moment, but again, depending on what is delivered at those schools and how much those measures might cost, there may well be additional funding to enable the next schools on that list to be addressed and delivered as well.
Thank you, Peter, for that further enhancement of how that 250,000 is going to be spent. I think it's paramount that public safety, being parent and children, going to and from the school runs, is definitely paramount. Now we've got 2 close schools, close in proximity, which would be in Tilbury, Lansdowne School and St Mary's School. Now, I've engaged with lots of residents down there, and they feel that there's not really sufficient crossings there to ensure both parent and child safety. So are those 2 on the list to be looked at? Because in the past, when I've asked questions into safer crossings for both schools, I've just been told that if they go further down the road, there's a crossing sort of further down the road with the lollipop lady there. But can there not be some kind of zebra crossing or that be put in for both schools to ensure that safety?
The measures will be something that will be looked at when the school, any individual school, is identified on the list for to be addressed in a given year. So the schools that you're talking about, I'm aware of some of the issues that have been raised, and the criteria kind of need to be assessed. But certainly, if the school identifies itself as meeting criteria, then the measures that need to be applied will be looked at, and I'm sure that the road crossing issue is one of those that would need to be assessed and explored further. Lansdowne it isn't on the list at the moment because it obviously, in terms of the priority and the criteria that are used, it doesn't come into the top listing for the schools to be considered for the next tranche for this year. But yeah, once that school is identified within that priority listing, then those measures can be explored in more detail.
See, with the two schools being in very close proximity, I mean, literally opposite the road to each other, I'm sure something can be incorporated for both to use.
Yeah, and that approach may well be one that needs to be taken. I guess we can't really say exactly what measures can be applied until that school is on the list, and then again the feasibility is undertaken. We can identify exactly what can and can't be delivered within the highway network and in the kind of design ramifications, as it were.
Thank you. I would appreciate if you would look closely at those two schools. And if we can move down slightly to the 175,000 freight management, if you could just briefly go through that. Did you get that? The 175,000 freight management? If you could just briefly, quickly cover that.
So the freight management is not on the list for this year. The 175,000 that you're referring to, I think, is probably the allocation that was in for last year. Just bear with me. So that's on the table in 3.1 you're referring to. Is that right?
Sorry, yes, I'm looking at the wrong. I should be looking
at the
lower one.
0.5, that's right.
So sorry about that. Area intervention program of TD, and if you can tell us what the TDP4 is, and that's a substantial amount of 300,000.
Yes, so that's Transport Development Priority Policy number 4, and yeah, as I suggested, that's a slight typo with a 300,000. It's actually 250,000 for this year. So that's my apologies for that. It's a slight typo, and that's the area where, as suggested, there are parts of the road network where that don't gain the focus because they're not around a school and because they're not in the road safety engineering program, because they haven't got that level of traffic, the level of accidents and incidents upon them. But we have recognised that an area approach would be more advantageous, because there are parts of the network that potentially don't get a look in, for want of a better word. So this area intervention program, that approach enables us to put a quite healthy chunk of the budget into looking at other parts of the network. And again, it will be kind of based on some of the accident stats that come out of the other parts of the network that aren't treated through road safety engineering, and will enable us to focus in on some of those other parts of the network and identify schemes and measures that can be applied, again, to support safer roads and improved access, therefore kind of encouraging, again, more walking and cycling and the like.
Thank you, Matt. And how far have we got? I mean, we've touched on the charging, the EV charging facilities for the electric vehicles. Now, 75,000 is going to be spent. Have we identified the sites where they're going to go?
So that policy was agreed earlier in the year for the EV charging. 75,000 identified to come out of the integrated transport block budget. And we are that will also be supported by the OLEV grant availability, which is the Office for Low Emission Vehicles. So there is grant funding that will help to support the money that we put in for increased electric vehicle charging. And we are, so following the approval through ONS and Cabinet earlier in the year, we're now able to go out to tender and procure a EV charging supplier. That supplier will identify locations with input from officers to identify the sites that can be brought forward for new EV charging to be provided. So we haven't got those right now. We've got an idea of where they could potentially be, because there's obviously some of the existing locations for EV charging, but we need to work with the successful tenderer for that contract, because they would have delivered EV charging in numerous locations for local authorities and others. So we're going to use that expertise and advice to identify the locations, and then we can share that information at a later date, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's brilliant, and thanks for brushing up and giving further information into that. Emergency minor works and parking requests, £50,000. Just briefly touch on this one.
Really, that's kind of ad hoc requests that come in for things like the potential need for junction protection or yellow lines to be provided. They can be looked at on an ad hoc basis, and other kind of minor works in terms of signage maybe being required in certain locations to improve a part of the network. So they're as they come in, really, they're on an ad hoc basis and dealt with that kind of small amount of budget. And that one actually is reduced to 46 rather than 50, so slight reduction there as well.
Okay, thanks for touching on that one. Passenger transport, how will the 50,000 be spent, and is that a true figure?
Yeah, sorry, yeah, that one is. So the passenger transport elements are where there is a need for enhanced and improved environment around bus stops, new flags, poles and signage. It can also go towards new shelters and enhanced waiting facilities, shelter facilities, and an amount of that is also put towards the ongoing improvement for real-time information.
Yeah. Right. Lastly, if you could just touch on the walking and cycling, £50,000. Is it a true figure? And do we have locations?
Yeah. So the £50,000 there, again, that will be utilised to enhance the walking and cycling network. What we'll use that for is to support and enhance the active travel elements that we spoke about earlier. Within the guidance, there's a need to identify what the council already does in terms of providing funding for walking and cycling improvements. So that will go towards things, as we suggested earlier, like enhanced signage, actually building improved walkway, cycleway paths, and enhancing the overall network. So it feels like a small allocation, but added to the 690 that we've got for active travel, it enhances it gives us the ability to enhance the network even further.
Thank you, Matt. I think your response has been very helpful, and it's clarified how the money's going to be spent, which is fantastic. Are there any members posing any questions or any comments before I ask all members if we're in agreement of recommendations outlined in the report?
Chair, Councillor Garish has his hand raised.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, Councillor Garish.
Thank you, Chair. Look, the bit I'm trying to understand, and maybe officers can help with this, and the question I had actually you touched on it as well earlier. In terms of freight management, HGV mitigation, clearly there are lots of residents in the borough who are concerned about the impact of HGVs on their area, and clearly this has been an ongoing conversation in the authority for quite some time in terms of how we deal with the effects on that, and what kind of interventions that we could have to deal with that. So could I just try and understand what you're suggesting in terms of the kind of the budget movements, as I understand it, from freight management to other areas, what the impact is in terms of like the projects that impacts, and I guess sort of most importantly, what can residents expect in terms of ongoing work to manage HGVs in their areas going forward?
Sorry, Councillor. Yeah, so what's needed is for a freight strategy to be developed and produced in order to inform where funding and where priorities should be placed, for freight management going forward. That's something that the team are working on and developing now in line with our emerging transport strategy and aligning with the local plan. So there is the need to undertake that piece of work to actually identify where the freight issues are, what needs to be programmed in, so that we've got a clear strategy and again a policy lead in terms of where funding should be allocated. The issues that exist at the moment, a lot of those seem to relate to moving vehicle violations, where vehicles are ignoring weight limits and kind of driving where maybe they shouldn't be driving through residential locations and the like. And we do get numerous reports on those. And that is something that we continually kind of say that should be reported to the police, because they have the enforcement power to enforce against. But we are also looking at options that might enable greater enforcement powers to come to the council. And we are working with our colleagues in Essex to bring forward powers and the infrastructure that would enable that to happen, with things such as fixed cameras for weight restrictions and the like in certain locations. At the moment, we haven't got the back office provision to enforce against those effectively. So it's still a police enforcement issue. We're looking to bring that forward for something that as a local authority we can take more control of in the future. And again, that will go hand in hand with a freight strategy. It's an element of that, I guess.
Thanks very much. Really encouraging to hear that this hasn't been dropped and that we're still making progress in that area. Clearly, I guess for me this is a big priority, not just for kind of the ward I represent, but across a number of communities in Thurrock. I guess the commitment then that we'd want to see on this one is just to make sure that we've got that the kind of corporate impetus there to make sure that we carry through on that strategy, that we kind of have the funding associated with it, and that we really do start to see some results once we're through that process.
Yeah, and like I say, I think that would be wrapped into the kind of transport strategy refresh and the local plan requirements and budget conversations around what's needed there. So so an important piece of work to come forward in time.
Cheers. Just one final question for me. In terms of sort of timings for that to come forward, what are we looking at?
So the programme for our transport strategy refresh identifies the numerous strategies and documents to be provided within the financial year. So we are kind of working on an interim strategy over the next 12 months with those sorts of documents being developed along that timeline as well.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you both. Thank you. Okay, have we got any more members that would like to pose any comments or questions, or have we exhausted this debate on this item agenda?
Chair, Councillor Potter has his hand raised.
Councillor Potter, would you like to pose a comment or question?
Yeah, actually, I've just had an emergency phone call. A very elderly member of my family has just had a fall, and I've got to go to the care home now to sort things out. I've got to leave the meeting. I'm ever so sorry.
No, please do, Councillor Potter, and thanks for letting us know. And please take my well wishes away with you, and I do hope they make a full recovery. You're on mute, Councillor Potter, but you are excused. Okay. Okay. Are all members exhausted the comments and questions? Kenna?
I believe so, Chair. There's no other hands raised.
Okay. Right. Are all members in agreement with the recommendations outlined within this report?
Agreed.
I'll take it we're agreed on that. Okay, right. We'll move on to item 9, and it's back in Thurrock, a roadmap for economic recovery, resilience, and a return to growth. Can I ask officers to introduce the report, please?
Chair, sorry, if I may, can I just highlight to members it's currently coming up to 9:10. I don't know whether you may wish to suspend standing orders just slightly to continue with the agenda. There's this item and the work programme that's left.
Thanks for that, Kenna. I'm sure by now all members and officers know that I look at, we're here until business is finished, and I hope you all agree that we can continue until our item agendas are finished. Can I have a raise of hands? Yep, lovely. Okay then. So if we can continue, Kenna, that'd be great. Again, item 9, back in Thurrock, and a roadmap for economic recovery, resilience, and a return to growth. Please, can I ask the officers to introduce the report?
Thank you, Chair. I'll briefly introduce this one. In fact, I'm going to do 2 introductions, because firstly, I'd like to introduce Gerard McLeave, who joined the council last month as our Assistant Director for Economic Growth and Partnerships. So welcome to Gerard, his first appearance at Scrutiny Committee. If I can just briefly introduce the report and set context before passing over to Gerard. You'll recall, members, that you considered a draft of the Backing Thurrock strategy September, and at that stage it was due to travel to Cabinet, which it did, and was endorsed for consultation. So the report in front of you tonight feeds back on that consultation exercise and summarises the main part of the strategy and where it's at, together with the associated action plan. The strategy is very much part of the roadmap for economic recovery, building resilience, seeing us through a transitional period as we get through recovery as soon as possible and into sustainable growth going forward. And sitting alongside the local plan is an absolutely fundamental document to help us make Thurrock a more prosperous place going forward. At that point, Chair, I'll pause. I'll pass you over to Gerard, and he can take you through the report in a little bit more detail. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy, for that introduction.
Thank you, Andy, and welcome, Gerard.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everyone. Kenna, I think we're going to bring up a presentation.
Yeah, bear with me 1 second.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Next slide, please, Kenna. So our agenda for the presentation, members, is aligned to the recommendations in your report. So the outcome of the consultation process at 1.1, the final report at 1.2, and the discussion on the draft action plan at 1.3. Next slide, Kenna, please. I think Andy covered those. One after that, please. Thank you. So in terms of the outcome from the consultation process, you'll be aware that the consultation took place over the period from the 1st of November to 10th of January this year. And given the various restrictions as a result of the COVID pandemic, we used a number of different methods to engage with residents, businesses, and with stakeholders. I think it's important to say that in addition to using that process to gather feedback on the actual strategy document itself, it was also about maximising awareness and understanding of the strategy. And again, in terms of those different methods, you will have seen from your report, in addition to publication on the Council's consultation portal, it was also publicised to over 2,500 businesses through the Business Buzz easing. The team also met with representatives from different bodies, including the Thurrock Business Board and the Economically Vulnerable Task Force, as well as a number of one-to-one meetings. And I think certainly from the feedback I have read, it was all generally positive and supportive of the direction of travel of the strategy. There was some feedback around, for example, expanded snapshot of the local economy, a greater focus on our key sectors such as the ports, logistics, and so on, and a greater focus on economically vulnerable groups. And you will see from the report that was included in your packs that these recommendations have been taken on board and indeed have fed through into the action plan that follows. Next slide, please, Kenneth. So in terms of the revised report, you'll be aware from previous drafts, this plan is very much about and aligned to the ambitions of the Council on people, place and prosperity. So it's very much about more and better jobs. It's about a better skilled workforce, and it's about supporting businesses to be stronger and to grow across the three themes of recovery, resilience and return to growth. Covering areas such as delivering financial support to businesses, guidance, advice and support, support local in terms of our supply chains and employment opportunities. And you'll know also from the various feedback on recovery that more than 25 million in grants has already been paid out to Thurrock businesses, and we continue to provide a whole range of advice and support through Business Buzz to over 2,500 businesses. And again, there's another edition of that actually going out this week. When we talk about a more resilient place, it is about resilient individuals, it's about businesses, and it's about the economy. And it's about being able to adapt and change and to weather future economic shocks. And it's also about being able to take advantage of future opportunities. And what that means in terms of resilience for individuals is that we will focus on addressing skill shortages. It's about supporting local people into jobs in Thurrock. It's about integrating services, so employment, for example, across a whole range of health and well-being and education services, tackling inequalities. Amongst businesses, it's about connecting supply chains and networks locally across Thurrock. It's about supporting our businesses to be more productive, for example, through the upskilling of workforces and improved processes. And all of that, of course, leads into our return to growth, which is very much a focus on infrastructure, transport, digital connectivity, contribution to net zero through a greener economy. But it's also about brand Thurrock. It's about communicating our economic strengths, our successes and our opportunities to government, to business, to local communities across the UK and across the world. Next slide, please, Kenneth. So turning specifically to the draft action plan, taking on board the feedback that we got back on the plan, we revisited parts of the vision to put a greater emphasis on collaborative working and the benefits that come from that. A specific focus on strengthening and growing our economy in a way that makes it more sustainable and more inclusive. And also about improving the overall resilience of this place and securing the well-being of everyone in our community. Next slide, please, Kenneth. Thanks. So the actions and activities that have been highlighted in the action plan are very much aligned to address the specific economic challenges and issues that have been identified in the strategy. So, for example, under Goal 1, enabling economic recovery, specific activities include ongoing advice and information to the business community on surviving and reopening post-COVID, prompt payments to businesses, promoting safe work practices, and also supporting people to reskill and upskill and to find work locally. Business resilience. Under this theme, we will focus on supporting the most vulnerable, particularly our young people, back into work. One of the key statistics that we have seen as a result of the pandemic is the number of young people not in employment, training or education has increased right across the whole country, and that's something that we will have to particularly look at going forward. It's also about supporting workplace wellbeing, helping businesses and their employees, providing careers advice, training and greater apprenticeships. And of course, on the return to growth, maximising the potential from our anchor organisations, sector-specific plans across some of our key growth areas, particularly our core sectors in terms of strengthening those to grow further and faster. Examine refreshed employability programmes to meet specific employability needs over the next 24 months and beyond. And this action plan will be very much a live document that's going to flex with activities as they are delivered. New ideas may develop to meet particular issues or challenges and also respond to new opportunities. Next slide, please, Kenneth. And so in terms of the areas for consideration, the first being the final report and recommendations 1.2 that is approved for presentation to Cabinet. I understand from previous overview and scrutiny meetings, there was an emphasis placed on the need for greater collaboration amongst key stakeholders. And my point on the whole system approach to delivery is exactly about that. It is how we bring together economic development, for example, health, business, our local communities, to provide that strategic oversight and delivery of the economic strategy and action plan going forward. So the whole system approach is very much about expanding collaboration between the public, private, community and voluntary sectors, and of course our knowledge institutions. It's about collective ownership, a guiding coalition for Thurrock's economy. It also builds on the collaborative communities principles of co-design and co-production. It's about harnessing the power of anchoring organisations and institutions to further our economic ambitions. And it's very much crucially about the integration of actions across a whole range of different areas, which then leads into the delivery of those actions in terms of the implementation, refine and mechanisms. And over the next number of weeks, we will be engaging with stakeholders across each of the areas that I mentioned to agree lead partners for each of the actions, to set out an approach and a mechanism for how each of the actions are going to be delivered and the time frame within which they're going to be delivered, and to assess the availability of resources. And very importantly, to agree the indicators for monitoring and reporting progress and impact of actions on Thurrock as we move forward. And then that brings me to my final point, is that monitoring progress and report back, which we are suggesting we will do biannually with this group. And that's the end of that presentation. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Gerard, for the presentation and the report. I do understand that the Federation of Small Business predicts that as many as 250,000 small businesses will cease to operate or trade by the end of the year, which many Thurrock businesses have been gravely affected by government pandemic restrictions, which is pretty scary. I think we need to ensure that we can do the best for Thurrock business, whether it's small businesses or medium-sized businesses or large businesses. As long as the government restrictions are relaxed, hopefully in the near foreseeable future, do you see, I mean, I know it's hard to predict the future, but do you see those governmental restrictions being relaxed hopefully soon? What do you predict?
I think that's a very difficult one to answer. I think I probably need a crystal ball for that. I mean, I think the one thing I would say in relation to the pandemic and the impact on the economy is that it's twofold. First of all, there is the impact of businesses as a result of the restrictions, as you mentioned. But the other, and just in relation to that, I mean, you will see from the action plan and the work that Council has been doing over certainly the last year, that I have seen there's a huge amount of activity and actions that has gone to support those businesses. The other piece that we also need to be focused on is how the pandemic generally has changed economic behaviour, how it's changed how people, where they do their work, where they shop, how it's impacted on supply chains going forward. And that is a much longer term issue. I mean, countries across the world are grappling with this. And it's something that we are going to have to focus on quite a bit in terms of our return to growth.
Thank you, Gerard. Just a comment, really, to finish off. I think it's fair to say that any financial support has been well received for these businesses. I mean, without some of that financial support, I'm sure that some of these businesses would have, gone into receivership or, experienced much more difficulty trying to get through this period. So just a comment saying that, any financial support that's been received has been well received, and thank you for that. I can see that we've got plenty of hands up. This time I'm not going to my favourite, Councillor Kerrin. I'm going to go over to Councillor Anderson for the first comment or question. Councillor Anderson.
Disappointed I'm not your favourite Conservative councillor, Chair. Very disappointed.
Can I just say, sorry, Councillor Anderson, you are my favourite Conservative.
Don't believe him, Alex. He told me the same last week.
So the first comment I wanted to make, and it may well be echoed by some other members, and you were probably expecting it, was the part 3.3 of the report mentions that your online analytics showed that only 142 people viewed more than one page on the I think it was the consultation portal. Obviously that's quite disappointing. Was it promoted on like social media, local pages, that sort of thing? That's my first question. And I'll just ask my second one, so you can take both. Free ports are mentioned in it. Obviously, having a Thames estuary port in the action plan here at the bottom of the page, it says that support the development of a bid to form a Thames estuary free port. Is there any sort of further detail you can give on that? I recall seeing in national media last year that I think the government were looking for bids for free ports this year. I was wondering if you could give any sort of further info on that at all. Was that's something that certainly piques my interest, and I think would be a positive development. So, is there anything on that you can speak on?
Sure. I'll maybe begin with both questions, and then colleagues may wish to come in because some of these things may predate my joining the council. But certainly in relation to the 3.3 and the online analytics, I mean, and I've seen this from other places. Given the impact of the pandemic and so on, the response rate is relatively low, but it's not uncommon in my experience. And the point I made at the start, part of this process isn't just about receiving feedback. It's also about actually raising awareness that the strategy is in place, that we are going to work with stakeholders across a whole range of different sectors and areas. And, you know, whenever you look at some of the analysis and the statistics, you know, over 2,500 businesses were written to. You know, the team also spoke with representative organisations, including the Thurrock Business Board and others. So I think certainly in my opinion, every effort was certainly made to garner feedback far and wide. In relation to the free ports, my understanding, the bid has gone in. The bid was submitted on the 5th of February. The team right across the entire Place Directorate and across the council actually provided a whole range of different supports to that bid process, from advising the bid team on answers to providing some statistics and analysis for them, as well as helping them with the drafting. I'm not sure if colleagues want to comment.
There's probably just one thing I'd add to what you said, Gerard, which I think covered pretty much everything. But I suppose the final thing I'd want to say is that our big focus going forward is the action plan, and we've been really clear, I think, in the report that we see that as a live document. We don't see it as something that's going to sort of stay exactly as it is forevermore. We're expecting it to adapt and change and flex as there are further conversations with our anchor organisations, but others as well, and also as opportunities arise. So I think going back to the second point about free ports, I'm not sure that we even knew free ports were a potential opportunity a year ago. But it's something that came along and is an opportunity now. So it is reflected in the action plan. Who knows what will be available in 6 months or a year's time that we should include.
Thank you, guys. Just a quick one from me. If someone can answer, what positive or positivity do you think the free port will bring to economic growth in the area?
Sorry, Chair, my turn to speak with the microphone muted. I'll kick off if I may, and I'll ask Gerard and Stephen if they want to input afterwards. But the Freeport proposals are seen very much by government as a key part of the levelling up agenda. but also as a massively important part of economic recovery agenda as well. I think what it will do, if it's successful, and as Gerard said, the bids have to be in on Friday, and we're expecting response back from government in the spring, is it will provide a significant platform for recovery and growth going forward, not just, I hasten to add, for the port sector itself, but also for the ripple effect, the significant ripple effect that Freeport status would have across the remainder of the borough, including how it would act to significantly benefit sort of supply chain industries as well, and help to provide for the necessary infrastructure going forward. And when I talk about infrastructure, we always think about sort of roads and hard infrastructure, but also in terms of sort of skills and employment side of things as well. So it would be, I think, you know, it's a emotive phrase, but I think it would genuinely be a game changer. And the support for the Freeport in the borough is really quite significant in terms of trying to put ourselves in what is a competitive process ahead of others up and down the country are also seeking to gain that status. But I think that we've got a really strong bid. You know, having Forth Ports and DP World side by side, I think having any one of those alone gives a lot of clout, but you join those two bodies together, and I think that the strength of that is greater still. So we'll wait and see, but I think it'll have a number of very positive spin-off effects as I've summarised. I don't know if you want to say anything more on that, Gerard. But
just to add, I agree with everything that Andy has just said. And you know, it has the potential to be transformative. You know, people will have seen the various press releases that have been issued around it. There's been extensive economic modelling done to try and identify the number of jobs that might be created as a direct result, upwards of 25,000 plus. And as Andy has said, not just in terms of the Freeport, but actually permeating across a whole range of different sectors in Thurrock, linked back to our skills and employability agenda, through to our schools, in supporting young people into employment in what would be, you know, high value employment opportunities.
Thank you for the further information. I think you know, it's most helpful that we're, you know, emphasising on each and every one of these items. Have we got any further questions or comments from members, please, Kenna?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Kerrin has his hand raised.
Yes, back to Councillor Kerrin. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. I waited my turn, and this is the last one of the municipal year. So I've got a couple of questions with your indulgence, Chair. Firstly, obviously you've reported about the claimant count being up 4%, and you know, everyone who's gone on that, it's a personal tragedy, but it also tells a story of people needing to be upskilled. With that in mind, we know that the adult college in Richmond Road will soon be no longer. So what plans are there to invest in lifelong learning to upskill people so that they're less vulnerable to having to actually join that claimant count? I'll just mute so you can answer that one.
I'll maybe pick that one up, Councillor Curran. I mean, for me, upgrading and reskilling are one of the cornerstones of economic growth. And it's fundamental in terms of going forward. And one of the things that we have committed to do in our action plan is to have a look and to refresh our employment programs that are specific to Thurrock, and particularly targeting those people who are on that claimant count. Because you're absolutely right. I mean, the figure's gone upwards of 7,000. Again, it's not unique to Thurrock. It is a problem that right across the whole of the UK. But there are specific and unique problems and issues that we have to address here, and therefore that means that we have to have specific and unique solutions to those. So how we deliver employability and skills programs, how we align those programs to the growth sectors across our economy. We just talked about Freeport, for example, so that we get that integration and joined up. And that's really what the whole system approach is about. You know, how we actually link economic development with skills, with our education, with our health providers, in order to give a complete picture of where we're going forward.
Thank you, Gerard.
Thank you. You're certainly right that this rise in the claimant count isn't unique to Thurrock, but I do wonder how many other boroughs will shortly not have a dedicated adult education centre. So I don't know if it's a further piece of work that needs to be done, but I think it's something which really needs to be looked at. I mean, I've got a personal interest in that. I took adult education courses there, you know, many years ago, and it set me up on to the career that I'm doing now. You know, so without that college, you know, I wonder where I'd be. So if we could sort of look into that, because it is, you know, we are going to be a borough without a dedicated, you know, adult education centre, and so if we could have some further work on that, please. The next thing I was going to ask about is the broadband connectivity. Now, obviously, home working has massively increased, and as both a parent and a teacher who is online a lot, I've noticed you know, the big demand on it there. Now, one of the things that the council can do is act as an analyzer, use its clout, be an agent of change or promote investment. So what specific things have you either got planned or have already done, which is helping to address the broadband gap, and especially the broadband gap for those who need it the most?
Gerard, would you like me to kick off with that one? So first of all, in terms of what's underway at the moment, so the council is part of the LFFN programme, which is the full fibre network programme, which is across South Essex. And the council recently bid for getting building fund money from which came through the LEP, the South East Local Enterprise Partnership, to enhance that programme with another £2.5 million of investment that will enable that programme to extend out even further across the South Essex. There are a large number of sites that have been identified in that programme that are in Thurrock. I don't have the details to hand, but I'm sure we can share some more details with you if it would be helpful. In terms of going forward, I think that we all recognise, particularly through this year, how important broadband connectivity is, and how it's particularly important, or there are particular groups, I should say, who have suffered disproportionately because they don't have broadband connectivity. And I know people who are teachers who could identify, you know, pupils in particular who are struggling because of the broadband connectivity issues. So I think we do recognise it's a real issue. So the full fibre bit is part of the story, but actually the other part of the story is access to IT equipment into broadband in the longer term. Obviously, it can't happen at the moment because of the lockdown, but I know that the libraries have very much tried to be an access point for computers to use the internet, and I know that remains a real priority for the libraries and the hubs.
Thank you for that. I do welcome the details being sent around, but with the amount of details that have been sent around post-meeting, I may regret it when my inbox gets filled up. But yeah, I do look forward to that, because obviously the aim is for children to go back to school, but you know, the longer, even though it's the most pressing issue at the moment, children at home, I think actually longer term, it's the people home working, and you know, a lot of people in Thurrock will be home working in the future. And you know, if we want to make Thurrock a decent place to live, also now it's the broadband issue, isn't it? It's not just about roads and about leisure. It's also about people being able to set up in the spare bedroom and, you know, get on with their work. So yeah, if those details could be sent around, that'd be great. Thank you. The next thing raising was on the levelling up paragraph. This is something I'm really interested in. But before we go into the levelling up of the Towns Fund, could I just ask why Grays missed out on the future High Street Fund? And were there any specific reasons given by the government?
If I could pick this up, there's quite a lot of background noise, and Councillor Kerrin, you're quite muffled at the moment. Your audio is quite muffled. I'm not too sure why, but if I don't know if somebody's got their mic on, because I can also hear a lot of whistling as well. So it's a bit
we were talking about.
Yes, it's a bit difficult to follow. In terms of the future high streets, and yes, the council unfortunately wasn't successful. Some were, some weren't in terms of their submissions. We have had a conversation with MHCLG around that. The issue appears to be with some of the way that the cost-benefit analysis was analysed. We've asked for some further information from MHCLG to understand a little more about that and the reasons why. That's been recently received. We're currently analysing that, and we will go back to MHCLG in due course.
Thank you, Andy. Yeah, so you're currently analysing it. As soon as we have those reasons, that'll be really useful information for us going forward. Now, with moving on to the actual Towns Fund in terms of levelling up. Now, 25 million, I'm always happy for money to be coming in. I won't sniff at it, but just to put it in context, I believe South Essex College, opposite the civic offices, was cost in the region of, anywhere between 48 to 52 million. Let's call it 50 million. So, what practical difference in terms of, if you think of I think of levelling up in terms of people being upskilled, people being able to access better jobs and all that sort of thing. What is this 25 million? What rewards are you expecting to see as a result of it?
Again, Chair, if I could just pick this one up in the first instance, at least, the levelling up agenda it will take many planks and guises, and I referred earlier on to the Freeport's bids being very much part of that agenda as well. So I understand the point that 25 million in the overall scheme of things in isolation doesn't seem to be a lot. It is what it is in the sense of the rules of engagement with the town fund bids. I think provided in a complementary way and manner to other things that are going on in Grays, for example, the local growth fund monies for the underpass, private sector investment. What the council's looking to do is the own estate, what other landowners are looking to do around the town as well. It can, in a proper coordinated way, make a fair contribution, accepting that it's not going to solve everything in its own right. That's why we looked at the future High Street Fund a bit as well. We understand that there could be further funding regimes coming along the line. So that's my summary position. The only thing I would hasten to add on this as well, of course, that the way the Town Fund proposals are set up, they are private sector-led organisations and bodies. There is support from the council in both the Tilbury and Grays Town Fund boards. The Tilbury Town Investment Plan, the TIP, has been submitted already at the back end of last month. And the Grays Town Fund Board have a couple of meetings left now this month before they submit their town investment plan by the end of the month. So yes, I think that the proposals that are coming forward and are being put together by the board will, alongside a myriad of other interventions, public and private sector, start to have a significant positive difference on the prosperity of the borough. The lives of our residents, skill sets, employability, etc.
Thanks, Andy. It's almost like I knew that last sentence was coming up from you, because you're quite right in terms of the skills gap. I think Grays has a higher proportion of gig and insecure workers, and actually a lot of people have less access to the jobs that give home working opportunities as well. So is there any particular project from the 25 million that you think will have an impact on either the skills gap, the nature of working in Grays, and the level of insecurity of a lot of the jobs that people do?
Chair, as we're talking about the council's own economic development strategy this evening, I don't have prepared the list of proposals that the Town Fund Board are bringing forward in front of me. But I think it's fair to say that there's a real opportunity here just to tie together a couple of debates this evening, because a lot of things are interrelated here. We talked about the interrelationship between Town Fund proposals and free ports and levelling up a gender, economic prosperity, etc. But there's also sort of questions raised previously around the opportunities, the challenges and opportunities that are brought about by COVID and different working patterns. And for example, in speaking with investors and landowners in the town centre, and not just in Grays, but Grays is a very good example of this, is changing working patterns with people not necessarily able to, or perhaps needing to in the future, to have to do the daily commute. It brings into question, the spaces and places that people will want to see going forward. So particularly in town centre locations like Grays, and especially those that have a significant opportunity to be repurposed, that concept of shared spaces and shared workplaces where people can hire rooms and potentially hire a room during the day to host a business meeting and hire it out in the evening for your daughter's 16th birthday party. So our location close to the most significant port sector in the UK, our location close to a world capital city, a changing way in which people will want to move and operate, changing economies, I think affords, yes, there's a big challenge for us now, but equally, I think if we can coordinate a lot of this in the right manner, and the economic development strategy seeks to do that, and the action plan seeks, as Gerard said earlier on, to be light on its feet and able to move and shift. Stephen's example of we'd not even sort of seen the infancy of Freeport 6 months ago, let alone got to where we've got to, which illustrates why it's important that we are light on our feet. All of that serves in my mind to excite and to suggest that actually some real opportunities here if we're on the front foot. And I very much think, which is why we've sort of driven this particular agenda and driven this particular piece of work and report to you this evening, I very much think that the economic development strategy has a really key part in bringing all that together.
Could I also?
Thank you, Andy. Councillor Kerrin, are you drawing to a close on your questions? Do you wish to pose any comments, questions? You're on mute.
Oh no, not now. I don't think. Yeah, just final one in relation to the action plan, and I don't know if this is a typo or I've just missed something, and you're about to say, oh, there it is, but I can't see anywhere on the action plan the mention of the Towns Fund. So you might actually turn around and say, actually, you've missed it, it's 1.3 or 2, whatever, but I can't actually see anywhere on the action plan any mention of the Towns Fund. So is there a reason why it's not on there? And if it is there and I've missed it, then I'll say fair enough.
Sorry, Jen. I was going to ask if you would come in anyway. I mean, and I don't know if Stephen knows if there is a reference in there somewhere. I'm not aware, and I think that cross-reference to everything is quite difficult to do. But Gerard, can I just ask you to come in?
Yeah, sure. So there's no specific reference to the Towns Fund in the action plan table that you have in front of you, but it is implied that it is in there, because one of the things that we talk about is actually working with partners to bring together a whole range of strategic projects, and I think the point that Andy was just making about coordination and complementarity is actually so crucial in terms of going forward. And the point I was making earlier about the whole system approach, it isn't just about a whole system approach together for planning for activity, but it's also about the delivery of that activity. So your point, Councillor Curran, about skills and employability, if you think about, and this is why we want to look at refreshing our employability programs and why it's so important in here, whenever you consider, a whole range of interventions together, whether that's, the Towns Fund, which may be only 25 million, but when you add that to the Council's capital programme and you add that to the private sector and you add that to the free ports, one of the things that we will want to do, for example, is to look at, well, if you take construction as a sector, what type of construction jobs might come up from all that level of investment in regeneration activity? How do we tie that construction activity back to the types of employability and skills courses that are being offered across a whole range of knowledge providers, so that when we're training people for jobs, that there are actually jobs available with the skills that employers are actually requiring. So that whole joined up piece, including the Towns Fund, is inherent across the entire action plan.
Thank you for that, Gerard. Are you finished, Martin?
You'll be pleased to hear yes.
Okay, I'd just like to touch on something that you touched on there, Councillor Guerin, and I do echo the sheer importance of adult education, which enables further educational skills and, again, employability. If they're willing to go into further education, they can improve their skills, rather dramatically, whether it be computer skills and so on, which can, boost their employability. So I'm definitely with you on that one. Is there any other members that would like to comment or make any further questions on this item?
No, Chair. There's no other hands raised.
Apologies, Chair. Just a very last minute one, if I can. Again, the action plan really important for this, and the fact that we're going to have those measures of success going forwards. I just wonder what is the venue going to be to monitor that and report back? Is that something that will come back to this committee on a regular basis, or elsewhere in the council? Thank you.
If I could just pick that one up, there's probably two steps in this. So the first one is in terms of working with our key stakeholders to determine who will take a lead in delivering specific actions and the role that the various partners will play. We will agree with them what the indicators are for measuring progress and impact of the actions over the period. The intention is that yes, that then will be brought back in terms of updates to this committee and to the Cabinet and wider council as appropriate.
Thanks. That's all, Chair.
Lovely. Thank you, Councillor Gerrish, and thank you for your response. Okay. If we've exhausted that debate, I ask that all members are in agreement to the recommendations outlined on the report, and we can move on.
Agreed.
All agreed. Thank you very much, all. We move on to item 10, which is the work programme. The work programme is included on pages 87 to 90 of the agenda. Does anyone have anything they wish to add or to amend on the work programme? Councillor Curran, is that your hand up?
Yes, Chair. It is. In terms, just before we go into the work programme, I'm just very aware that tonight nearly every item has had a couple of, we're going to be getting written items come back to us, either government letters being bounced on or more analysis of particular budgets, whatever. Could I ask Democratic Services over the next day or two, would you be able to send out a list from the minutes of all the different written items that have been promised to us, because I'd just like to have somewhere a list so that I can tick them off as they come through, because of the amount of respect I have for the work officers are putting in. I really want to read every single item carefully, and I just wonder if Democratic Services could just give us a list either tomorrow or whenever the minutes are put together with what sort of follow-ups we're expecting. I know they won't all come in one go, because bouncing on a letter from the government will be quicker than another item on, one of the detailed aspects of budgets. So I do get they won't all come in one tranche, but if we could have a list, that would be really helpful. And then just before the work program, I just want to say, Chair, this is the last meeting of the municipal year, and I'd just like to say thank you for your chairmanship, and just say, it's been a good year.
Thank you, Councillor Kerrin, and I thank all members and officers for your contribution. It's been a great experience, I'd say, PTR, since I've chaired. I do like to think that I've given everyone equal opportunity to put across their points and their questions, and I appreciate the support from yourself, Councillor Kerrin, and all other members. So thank you very much. Before we go on to the work programme, I'd just like to, I didn't bring it up in urgent items of business, but I'd like to pose some questions to officers regarding the local plan. So new house or new homes targets that have been set for us. Now, we all know that under the local plan over the next 2 decades is for the delivery of 32,000 homes. I do believe that we've come forward with some of those, a small number, but I still believe that we are some 26,000 that needs to be delivered over those next 2 decades. And with government, what can I say? With government looking over us and local councils nationwide to deliver more housing. Now, we know that they can come in if we don't foresee the target. They will come in and override our planning, and I do believe that's under the National Planning Policy Framework, which will effectively stop planning decision making at a local level, also meaning that our green belt could be more at risk of being developed on. Ideally, we in council should be making the decisions to approve applications for sustainable development, and I fear if government does step in, less weight would be given to both affordable homes and social housing. So I posed a couple of questions that I'd like officers to take away and give a written response, please. I'd also like the leader, Councillor Gledhill, to be copied in on the responses and the questions. My first question would be, who is it in council that is halting development of new homes from being delivered? Is it the administration, or is it senior planning or assets officers? So that's my first question. I do believe that there are solutions to fulfilling our obligations to deliver new housing and to meet our targets, even though I believe that the targets are inflated and the overall numbers are questionable. But there are developers waiting to purchase land, which council could actually profit from the sale. Council wouldn't ideally have to sustain any costs. The developer would meet costs of the land and to the build, and they'd also maintain the properties, hence making kitchens and bathrooms and boilers, etc., all up, kept up to date every sort of 10 to 15, 20 years maximum, in order, leasing a large number of properties to council for social housing, hence taking down the current waiting list, which is currently, I do believe, around about the 8,500 mark here in Thurrock. I do understand that half of that amount are deemed as adequately housed, but maybe over occupancy with children of different sexes approaching, puberty stage, where they're not allowed to share bedrooms and so on. The second question. I mean, council have only managed to approve 59%, I do believe, of the government's target for new homes over the past 3 years. I think the government set down a figure of 3,088, and Thurrock Borough Council actually come up with 1,823. So in the past year, I do believe that there's only 558 new homes been completed, and the target was 1,068. I know we must take COVID, the pandemic, into account, but I think there's plenty of opportunity here. And the second question I'd like to know, has council identified locations what we can build on, like such as brownfield sites? Because I can just use one for example. It would be Manor-Way Industrial Estate at Curzon Drive, where our Thurrock offices were at one time. That's probably very much in need of redevelopment. Can we not be looking at sites like that and bringing in developers that are able to, like I say, purchase the land, build the properties, and perhaps lease them to council on a long period of time, which can be deemed for social housing, affordable housing, and we can ideally get that long and huge waiting list down here in Thurrock. When our council actually going to, take the bull by its horns and deliver anywhere near these targets, hence not having government come in, override us and tell us what we can and can't have.
Thank you, Chair. You said in opening that you'd want a written response to this, which we'll provide, and we'll also provide going back to item 10 in the work programme, an update report on the local plan for the first meeting of the new municipal year. And the simple answer to everything that you raise, which is all fully understood, is this will be delivered through a new local plan. We're looking at an accelerated programme now that the issues of the Lower Thames crossing are out the way, which have been an impediment in the past to us being able to bring forward the local plan. So we are looking at an accelerated programme, the various statutory steps we have to go through. So unlike the economic development strategy you've seen this evening, which isn't bound by those sorts of processes, it isn't something you can produce overnight. And we're looking very much at continuing the approach that has been adopted thus far about a local plan being very much infrastructure driven, community led, and also of the highest quality. So there needs to be a strategic approach. There needs to be a quick delivery of that local plan. There's already been a couple of stages of consultation, which you will recall, and the last issues and options consultation, in answer to one of your questions, set out the various approaches, including looking at brownfield first, and then looking at what other various types of spatial option could come forward. There is a lot of interest in the borough, so we do have choice in terms of what sites might be allocated going forward, but that has to go through that local plan process. So that's a very short response to your statements, Chair. Your concerns are fully understood. We'll provide, as requested, because of the gap now, because of the end of this municipal year and the start of the next, we'll provide, as requested, a written summary of the approach that's being taken. And as I say, with your agreement, it was something we were going to recommend this evening anyway, an update on the local plan in terms of a full report to the next meeting of the municipal year. I think under the circumstances would be absolutely appropriate.
Thank you, Andy, for your response. In short, I think we need to, just enhancing what I've just gone through is avoid at every cost government coming in and overriding our planning department and literally dictating to us what we can and can't do with our land. Now, I'd rather us on a local level have some decision making there. And sort of trying to protect our green belt. I know we're going to lose a certain percentage of it, but I think we'll be more at risk if government come in and override us, and we won't have no say so. And again, I emphasise that if they do step in, perhaps we'll be losing affordable. And we've spoke about affordable and social housing before. Now, I've questioned you on several occasions, Andy, and tried to get assurances from you that out of those 32,000 homes, that 35% of those would be deemed as affordable and both social housing. I think it's about time, like I say, that this council takes the bull by its horns and deliver, and there are solutions out there that effectively won't cost council a penny. They'd profit from the sale of the land, but it'd be ensuring that the homes are there for low income families and so on, and the social element is there. I really can't push that enough. The social element housing that is required, because we often hear affordable housing. Now, affordable housing is only affordable if you can afford it, and if it's charged at 80% of the market rate, that is quite expensive. So we need to see more implementation, of further social housing, and we need to be hitting that 35% target.
Chair, I didn't know if that was a statement or whether you wanted a response on that, but yeah, absolutely understood. As you say, we've had this discussion and debate before. The local plan is more than just about housing numbers. It's more than just about the housing itself. It's about having a great place going forward, and the local plan driving how Thurrock will be shaped, both in terms of housing, employment, open space provision, leisure, health facilities, etc., etc., etc. And the local plan's importance can't be overemphasised in that regard, and that is why bringing it forward as quickly as possible has to be a key priority.
Thank you, Andy. I just, it would have been nice to seek some assurance from yourself, a senior officer, that you've got, intentions of reducing that 8,500 people waiting list for Thurrock. We need to be seriously tackling halving or at least getting that number down. Because for many months, years, it seems to be hovering around the same sort of amount, or growing slightly, and Thurrock Council seems to be continuing to fail to address the current waiting list and getting that down. So I'd just like, council, because it's ideally you senior officers, Andy, that are pulling the shots here. A lot of people seem to think that us 49 councillors run council, but although we really do try to influence council officers into making the right decisions, but sometimes those decisions are not made, and I just wish, I hope and I pray that the council, look at tackling those numbers and reducing them, to at least an acceptable level, because 8,500 is not acceptable at all. And I don't know if members would like to, I can see that Councillor Kerrin has got his hand up. I hope you support me, Councillor Kerrin, in what I'm saying.
I could just briefly come in, because I didn't mean not to give you the assurance you were looking for. I can assure you that all of the various aspects that need to go to the local plan, as I was summarising, whether it be housing, affordable housing, social housing, whether it be employment, whether it be infrastructure, whether it be parks, leisure, recreation, open space, health, education, all of those things need to be balanced off as part and parcel of bringing forward a local plan which will help to make Thurrock a great place. So all of those things need to be considered. All of those things will be in the mix as we take the local plan forward, and as we engage with communities, as we engage with business and industry and stakeholders, and not least members, in bringing that plan forward. So I can assure you that all of those things will be appropriately scrutinised and form part of the plan as it's developed.
Thank you, Andy. Just a drastic reduction is needed in the housing waiting list. If I can go over to Councillor Kerrin, and Kenna, can we just confirm, is there any other hands up?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Kerrin had his hand raised, and then Councillor Van Day.
Okay, again, I'll go over to Councillor Kerrin, and then we'll go to Councillor Gerrish and then Councillor Van Day.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to, I agree with what you're saying about the local plan, and I've sort of spoken to you privately about it as well, and I think it's such an important piece of work. Can I just ask as well, because this is the last, this could be the last group of how we all sit together on this committee, depending on elections and that. So can I just ask that obviously the A13 and Stamford La Hope come back at the earliest opportunity to PTR in the work programme. And I think also the items, the roadmap to economic recovery, I'd like to see that come back in the new municipal year. But with obviously all our comments taken on board and some of the specific questions we asked as well, because I think it's really important, and to show you how that's why I went into the level of detail I did with questioning it, because I spent quite a few days on it, because it's so important. So if it could come back with some of our thoughts and comments put into it and questions answered, that'd be great. And I'll hand over. That's the last from me, Chair. You'll be pleased to know, and I hand over to Councillor Van Day.
Okay, if we can. Okay, then we'll go to Councillor Van Day, followed by Councillor Gerrish. Okay.
I don't mind if Gerrish wants to go first. I'm not.
Okay. Councillor Gerrish, do you wish to go before Councillor Van Day?
Thank you, Chair. While I'm pleased to be called, I'm afraid I hadn't indicated on this one, so I'm quite happy to hand it back.
Okay, well, thank you. As Vice Chair, I'd just like to thank the Chair. I think, John, you've been excellent. It's been a good committee. I would like to thank all the officers for all their hard work. And I think we must bear in mind that we're in unprecedented times here. We've had an awful year, the whole country, well, the whole world actually, isn't it? And things will naturally slow a bit. So, take that into consideration with all the comments that have been made tonight. That's what I'd like to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Van Day, and thank you for your contribution whilst you've been vice chair of this PTR. Like I say, I thank each and every one of you, you know, members and officers, because I have kept you here, you know, after time where most councillors would have wrapped it up. We've been here and we've seen business through, which I think is the way it should be done. We're representing the Thurrock constituency and our residents, and I like to think that they're getting value for their money and not being persecuted with taxation all the time and having to pay for someone's failures. Before I wrap up the meeting, I'll just we know that Councillor Potter had to nip off quick, and I'd just like to say before we finish the meeting, my thoughts are with Councillor Potter's constituent, and you know, they've had a fall, and I just hope they have a full recovery, and I hope that it's not too serious. And in saying that, I just thank everyone. That concludes the business of the meeting this evening, and I now declare that the meeting is closed. I do believe it's 22:15, 10:15. Thanks again, everyone. You've been outstanding. Thank you.